Hello and welcome back to Downtime Activities, and welcome back to our Star Wars RPG game, our kind of post-campaign discussion about our Star Wars RPG game/games. If somehow you're watching this video and haven't watched any of those, a brief explanation. We did a series of Star Wars RPG games on the channel, all kind of separate stories, some of them in different sort of Star Wars RPG core rule books. And then slowly those stories started to combine until eventually all the stories were one, the whole group was together, and that was our most recent Star Wars RPG series that went on the channel, and that's the Artifacts of the Grey, which is a kind of short, I think 8 total episodes, somewhere around there, 8, 9, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
That kind of is the whole group going on a big adventure together to put an end to the game. And we don't have everyone here. We're missing our 2 young Force sensitives. They weren't able to be here for this one, but the rest of us here are just going to kind of discuss the campaign, ask some questions, go into some behind the DM screen stuff, some behind the scenes character decision stuff, and just kind of an informal conversation. Just talk about the game. It ended well, I think. I'm happy with the ending.
It is worth saying, if you haven't seen
spoiler alert,
the series
finale,
almost guaranteed major spoilers ahead.
Super major spoilers.
100%.
We're not going to dance around anything, which is kind of the point of having a conversation like this, is that we get to stop dancing around stuff and actually just talk about it.
Can Scoos just give us a major spoiler alert? Spoiler alert, man.
We can talk Scoos and we can talk NPCs. I'd actually really like to, and that get kind of pick your guys' brains about some stuff with the NPCs. To start with, though, what I really want to discuss about this game is how we went about running it, and that is talking about this different separate stories slowly coming together and what your guys' thoughts were, how you felt. Like, this is our first time. We've talked about that as a gaming group before. This is our first time really doing it all the way through. What's opinions?
I mean, that's just kind of what I was going to talk about. Is you and I in particular have had a conversation several times over the years about, like, wouldn't it be really cool to run a bunch of solo campaigns and then let all the characters, like, organically drift together? So then, like, since they're all running at the same time, characters are maybe hearing rumors about stuff going on, like, you know, all the characters are hearing some rumor about a thief prince down south, and, like, somebody at the table's probably like, I bet that's another player character. Then they get there and it's not actually the thief prince, it's another asshole. You know, but I always like the idea of it because, like, that's, I guess, more realistic, at least in the sense that, like, everybody kind of has their own stories, and then those stories start drifting together. And you just kind of finally wanted to put it into practice, which from what I saw was a stupid amount of work. You know, but I'm so happy with how it actually came out. Like, we had this conversation you know, during the dinner break in between the first 2 Artifacts of the Grey episodes, because we filmed we'd like to film 3 episodes. We
tend to do
2
or 3.
So, like, we filmed the first episode. We went to grab dinner. I think you had gotten called into work.
Yeah.
No, I think you were doing an audition.
Audition.
You were
Right.
auditioning.
Yeah.
He's an actor.
Get a role in that thing I auditioned for, but it's far from a real thing. Anyway.
So we ran and we grabbed dinner, and the whole time we just kept talking about how, like, that was, at least as RP went, probably the best session we'd ever done.
And it was it was the, quote, first time, like, our characters had met, so it was a lot more serious, because, you know, normally throughout the videos we get sidetracked and we end up talking shit.
Erickson has referred to us as chucklefucks more than once on camera.
And I've been a part of that chucklefuckery, so I can't really judge you too much. But it is something it's part of what makes the game fun.
Well, and that's something we've never wanted to, like, we want to stay on track because we're recording, but we also don't want to, like, shy away from that too much, just because, like, that's so much of playing tabletop RPGs with your friends is, like, are those side comments, are those jokes, are those references, is everyone constantly going, Potter? Because Erickson named an NPC and didn't, and, you know, I do this all the time where it's like either I pick up on a joke already when I'm, like, naming stuff, and I'm like, nope, That's way too easy. I know the joke the players are going to make and come up with a new name. Erickson and I have had the conversation a lot about how nothing is safe from players. So I bet the name Potter just like...
Seems safe.
Yeah, just glanced by until it happened. But but just like that first session, we like... There were so many in-character conversations. There were so many in-character interactions, both between like player characters and with the NPCs. And it was involving, elements from multiple characters' backstories. We dragged Dev Malior into it just because, of course, we had to. And we went and talked to Biala, which is somebody that only Raiden knew, and even like loose quotes. It was like it just felt like immediately the whole group has come together, and the idea is great and it's working.
I think it was just that whole idea fosters in-game roleplay, like especially because we were trying really hard not to reveal anything about our characters. Like there was a little bit,
and that's a conversation to have.
We'll get to that later.
Well, yeah, we were. I mean, for me, it was just trying to like learn everybody's character, and especially your guys' side. We had one session, two episodes.
Two sessions.
We had 4 episodes, 2 sessions.
4 episodes, just us.
And then, but we each had 2 episodes, 1 session of us doing our own solo stuff, which while I understand, I am jealous
that they got more.
Yeah, I am a little jealous, but I mean, we came into the series super late.
Well, you had just moved back.
Yeah,
when our first episode.
Yeah, if you hadn't watched any of the Commander Badger episodes, we had to do that. Digital. It was digital because I was all the way in Minnesota, so it wasn't until I moved back that we actually finally got to get together to do our campaign, which
the timing of that worked out.
It worked out really well,
very, very
and
well.
And it set up for some really good moments, especially right off the cuff. You've had a bad day. Killed me. They killed me.
Well, what's great about that too? I really think we wouldn't have had that if we didn't have our own individual sessions too. Like I like.
Yeah, because I had no idea what had happened to you.
No, there's
my first 2 sessions was like the purest origin story you could have.
No,
like, it was all like, I'm just a guy, and the reason I join everybody like is because of this. Otherwise, he was just a farmer.
You were the classic rebel upstart story of like someone who gets beat down by the Empire and stands up for yourself.
No,
like
there's
only because they gypped him of 2,500 credits.
After that was dead.
They killed him too. They called the episode. He did have a bone to pick.
How are you standing here? I got better.
There's totally a difference between like, oh, here's my backstory, and okay, boom, we're starting the campaign, or like actually playing through that backstory and seeing those events. Like if Raiden's story had started, like with him helping rescue Flopsy and Manus from Gracchus's like palace tower, that whole return to Nar Shaddaa wouldn't have had any impact to it. Like going back into the tower, even if that's part of his backstory, is that he was once hired to steal something from here. Like none of it just would have landed quite the same way. But that moment of Zadra showing up and asking Raiden to break back into Gracchus's palace, because I was the one who played through all those events, like it just lands so much better. But it is way more work.
It was a lot of work. The big thing I want to stress about this, if you want to try it as like you're a DM, want to doing this with your gaming group, know your gaming group super well before you attempt to do something like this, because part of it is kind of understanding the way things are going to flow so that you can direct things to eventually converge. For instance, one of my favorite stories of this whole campaign is Will just calling me an evil genius because I hired Will's character to save Matty G and Jocelyn's characters before they were in trouble. I knew where they were going next, kind of the way the story was going to go, and I knew the way that they act as like players, and I knew the situations they're going to put themselves in, and I knew I was going to be able to basically lock them away in a tower for him to save them. So I, just by the timing of how sessions got recorded, I literally had to hire him to save them before I put them in peril.
Well, and I figured it out just because I had to edit and upload all the videos without watching any of them, which is why we just Erickson and I had to both kind of be on top of stuff. Erickson was naming each episode, writing the descriptions, and writing the end cards for each one because I couldn't watch any of them. So, and that was the same with all of the campaigns. So I knew a little bit more about what was some of the story beats that were going on in everybody's campaigns than most people, just because I kind of had to in order to upload them. If we do something like this again, we could have you guys upload your own.
Yeah, that in hindsight, that probably would have been smarter, but...
So I knew Maddie G and Jocelyn were on their way to Nar Shaddaa, which Erickson and I had talked about. I feel like what I've done is kicked up a hornet's nest, drove away very quickly, and now 2 kids have just ridden their bikes up the hill and are now playing under that tree with the hornet's nest and have no idea what's coming. So I figured it out a week later or something like that. I was just I've been thinking about it all day, and I was just and I finally just texted Erickson asking if I could ask a spoiler question about I was it's I know Maddie G and Jocelyn are on the way to Nar Shaddaa, and this guy's just hired me to break back into Gracchus' palace. He doesn't want me to steal something, does he? This is a rescue mission. But if that's the case, they're not in trouble yet. and I was the cogs were just connecting, and I was just oh my god, he's an evil genius. And then when it happened, I just get a text, 9:00 at night or something. It's just the damsels are in distress. I repeat, the damsels are in distress. And I knew immediately what he was talking about. And then you talking about how Matty G left here blaming himself for getting them caught, and you were so happy that he took the steps to get them caught that you didn't have to force anything. And it really was taking advantage of how well you knew the playgroup and knowing that based off of stuff that's happened, and you only sort of need to tease it in a certain way in order to get the pieces to fall correctly. It was really pretty impressive.
So here's a question. When you did that, were you going to force it to happen?
If I had to, here's the thing. So, again, this is spoilers. So, the basic gist of this, there's a Hutt tower that's a crime lord of Nar Shaddaa, which is a smuggler villain moon. All crime all the time, I think, is what we said a lot in your early sessions.
Little Coruscant.
Little Coruscant.
The smuggler's moon.
Lots of names.
Was the Moon of Sin one of them?
I don't know.
Or something.
It should have been.
Sin Moon.
Anyway, this Gracchus, he's the Hutt who's in charge of it. He's a actual character from Legends lore. And he is a Hutt who's super buff and has a necklace made of broken lightsabers. And he's super obsessed with Jedi lore and history. And when you were originally hired to break into his tower, it was by Zadra, who you guys all know now, who was a shadowy figure who was going through a syndicate to get these strange crystals stolen from this Hutt's tower. These crystals were the Kyber crystals that were used to make Manus and Flopsy's first lightsabers. But later on, Manus and Flopsy show up to Nar Shaddaa, not knowing where Zadra is, their other true master, Master Tegunji, which none of you guys met, because he had just died. They were trying to start their new lives, and Flopsy was a pit fighter. And Flopsy's pit fights eventually led them to getting into a high-end pit fight, which was in the cantina bar inside of Gracchus's tower. The way I knew that they were going to get themselves in trouble is the weapons they had been using up till then were ancient Jedi swords, because Zadra hadn't found them yet with these Kyber crystals to make them lightsabers. So they were using these ancient Jedi relics as their weapons, and I knew they had them on them at the end of the last session and weren't going to remember to take them off. They're going to want to stay armed because they're RPG players.
There was also some conversation about kind of trying to sell them, right? Because they knew they were old and valuable?
Well, eventually, after they got lightsabers, I think that was. But at the time, that was their main weapons. And so they were bringing it with them, and I knew RPG players are not going to separate them, especially my RPG players going to a party, are not going to separate themselves from their weapons.
I mean, let's be honest. Even in the very first Star Wars campaign we did,
you were already on that. Yeah. So they had these weapons on them. They're going to this place that knows all about Jedi artifacts and would see someone with these Jedi artifacts and be like, "Where the fuck did you get these? We want more of them." And so I knew those pieces were going to be in place, and with those pieces in place, I didn't really have to force it, but even if they did something to try and avoid it, I could still push it. I could still make it happen and make it feel like it's deserved and makes sense. Because the decision they made to bring those in, all of a sudden these people, like, they show up and they've never been to this tower before, and they start seeing Jedi relics all over the walls, broken pieces of lightsabers framed in doorways and stuff, and they're like, this dude's weirdly into Jedi stuff. And then all of a sudden, Flopsy loses a fight, Manus is taken to a back corner and, like, questioned. He tries to lie his way out of it, but it's against a guy that I still can't remember the name of, a gank in a suit, who we always forget the name, Vackrel. And Vackrel's whole way he's built as, like, an NPC was that, like, he's Ray Charles to the bullshit. Like, he's very, very hard to lie to.
Which is why I was just straight up honest with him every time we talked on the phone.
Not much of a combatant, but very, very hard to lie to. And Matty G tried, and I was confident Matty G wouldn't succeed against this guy. So then Matty G's locked away, they're getting questioned. Zadra learns about this, hires Raiden, and that's how the stories come together.
Well, and they were looking
Zadra
for...
knew you had already broken into the tower.
And they took... they took the first step themselves just because, like, from what I understand, they were like, let's go someplace shady so we can do underground pit fights so we can make some money. And you were like, you were like, there's like this place, there's like Nar Shaddaa, there's like this place. I could probably come up with. You were like, it's like there's Tatooine, there's Nar Shaddaa, there's like I could find a couple others, and everyone's like, we don't want to go back to Tatooine. Everything happens on Tatooine. Nar Shaddaa it is.
I was like, perfect.
Literally just planted the seeds. Well, okay, so and in this case, how much of it was you kind of almost steering everything in the way through the story, and how much of it was just how the dice fell? Because I'm thinking back now to my first session with the escape plan. You know, the original plan was to hijack a TIE fighter and get out of Dodge quickly. Then it turned into me having to get to an escape pod super quickly.
And I mean, here's the thing with that. Little behind the screen here, I would have fudged the numbers if I had to make sure that whatever vessel you left that ship in, it got shot and it crash landed in his nerf field. That was gonna. But the thing is, you could have taken a TIE fighter. TIE fighters don't have hyperdrives. You're not going to get out of that world anyways.
Yeah.
Or you could have taken the escape pod. There's no hyperdrive. You're not going to be jumping into hyperspace and getting out of there. So it's just a matter of time before you're shot out of the sky, you land in his nerf fields, and your stories combine. So just part of it is knowing players, and part of it is setting up situations when you know you're getting close to the combination, that there's not really a way that the stories don't crash into each other. Even, like, the players still have agency and still make their decisions, but whatever decisions they make, it will drive in that direction one way or another.
Well, and I knew, as soon as I met Alikern, I was like, and kind of made that offer of like, it's like I'm not gonna join your rebel cause or whatever, but if you need an extra set of guns and you're willing to pay, give me a call. And and pretty much as of the end of that session, I was like, that I know that's how these campaigns are going to combine. Like, sooner or later, Alikern's going to call because he's got a big job. He's got this thing for the rebels, and that's how I'm going to meet, this rebel scum.
Well, and and even when we were recording that session, where we meet Alikern, we get the information that we needed from the brain in the jar after drugging it up. He mentions, I know these. I know somebody who we could hire. He's going to be pricey. That session ends. I look at Erickson. I'm like, you just mentioned Will and his group, didn't you? Erickson looks at me. No.
Well, and the way that you figured it out for sure.
Was you guys talking? Yeah,
we were watching Futurama or something. I think in the heads in the jars and something came up and I was like, speaking of brains in the jars, we met a brain in the jar. And Will's like, I know exactly who that is.
Literally before I could ask, like they said, it's like we interrogated a brain in a jar. And as I was about to ask, was it super addicted to spice? Jerry was just like, yeah, it was hard to talk to. He was just like super hyped up on spice. And I was just like, I know where that brain came from. Which,
of course I know. He's me.
Which I took the brain out of the robot that was that it was piloting around.
Although that interrogation was really funny, just having to pay Scooz because Scooz up until the very end did not like he was mixed feelings on Badger. He
You were an Imperial in his eyes. He was a rebel, man.
Yeah, I'm a rebel, man. I was Imperial in his eyes, but I was an okay Imperial because I like to shoot other Imperials. His words towards me. So I paid him like the credits. He gives me all the spice he has, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get more." What?
And that's talking about the brain in a jar is something I want to talk about. Like, this method of running a campaign, by and large, works best if the players aren't communicating. Mm-hmm. If everybody kind of goes into it blind. So that way when, like, if I had never heard any story about Scoos, just like, you know, when we're getting ready for this rebel mission, if the two rebels had just been like, we're bringing a guy with us, and just like, and like, then it just would have been this roller coaster ride of dealing with this insane NPC.
This insane NPC who hijacks the radio and puts on Vibro Country.
The problem is that, like, we're all really good friends. Mm-hmm. We like telling stories. We like hanging out, and like, we have a lot of fun playing these games, and we want to talk about those jokes. We want to talk about the funny moments. And everybody was very careful to only mention things that they thought were unimportant, or to not give too many details. Mm-hmm. The problem was, it demonstrated how deep the threads ran that you had built connecting everything. Because almost every, like, totally innocuous comment about somebody else was from somebody else's campaign. Making a joke about the little Jedi interceptors from the beginning of episode 3, mm-hmm. and, and Matty G being like, well, if you want one, I know where you could get one. We sold one to a guy because, like, I had to ride on Flopsy's lap in order to fly the thing around. You're going to get picked up by the Inquisitors immediately flying one of those around. So they just had to ditch it. And I just looked at Erickson and went, they sold it to a shady ship dealer on Mon Cal. I know that because that's the guy who put the cortosis weave in Skull. And Erickson just mentioned that the guy had one sitting in his shipyard. And it was just like, oh, that's interesting. And just, like, totally walked away from it. The brain in a jar was the exact same thing, where it was just like, oh yeah, brain in a jar. And it's just like, I got that brain in a jar. I'm the reason Alucard has that brain in a jar. Like, it was that, and that just kept happening. Alucard popped up in all 3 campaigns at one mm-hmm. point or another.
Very briefly in the Force Sensitive campaign until everything came together. Yeah. Literally, like, Flopsy never met him until you guys met him. Literally, session 1 of Matty G's campaign, Alucard happened to land on the plant on Quat, which is where Matty G was a street kid thug, and happened to land there. And Matty G happened to be in a port looking for marks to pickpocket. Saw this dude land in a nice ship and pickpocketed 100 credits off of it. And that's the only interaction he had with Alucard until Alucard called them for the rebel mission.
Well, obviously, like, Dev Mallior showed up in everybody's game.
Well, I mean, you kind of have to have Dev Mallior show up and all that, like.
That was the other funny thing. It's like anytime somebody's bringing up Dev, and it's just like Dev, that son of a bitch, and Skler's just quietly like, the next time we see him, I might actually just shoot him. And it's just like, I don't really have any good reason to shoot him. He'll probably just turn and run when he sees me again. But.
Well, this was the funny thing is you met him in your first session, even your solo one. I didn't meet him until we had to go rescue him, and my first interaction with him was after blowing Dev the fuck up,
blowing up the prison compound he was inside of, and nailing it with where you should blow up because it was literally his cell.
A lot of prisoners got blown up over the course of
this game. This is true.
Over his cell, and he was leaning up against the wall when we detonated it.
To kind of bring it back to just how well RP-wise the first couple sessions felt, I think a big part of that is that backstory was played, not written. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing. So backstory is much more real and tangible. I think a big piece of it too, and this isn't to be like, oh, well, good job me, is like NPCs.
Yes.
And the fact that the NPCs from your backstories were shared or were real tangible characters who were there that you've had your interactions with. And they almost acted, I feel like, as a kind of like a little catalyst to like, Scoo says some weird stuff, and then your characters are like, oh, he's so weird. And then like you kind of chime in for that, and then you guys are talking. And then from that point, it's all the players and you guys having these rich stories and being, again, you guys did a pretty good job of not sharing this with each other. So now you guys, as players, are excited to be like, oh, they get to see my character finally and see what I've done. And I get to explain the armor I'm wearing, and there's a story behind it that they don't know, and I can kind of go into that and
the
exploded.
NPCs. The NPCs are just worth talking about anyway because I mentioned this to you at one point. It's like a lot of people, especially in like sort of the D&D community, complain about dungeon master characters, where the dungeon master makes an NPC that's essentially just a player character member of the party, which is, it can be fine. Small scale games in particular can really get away with NPCs in the party, but it's a very hard thing to do without sort of lessening the actual player characters. You know, because especially as like the author of the world, or, you know, as the old joke is like, the DM's not a god. The god are merely NPCs.
Yes.
The game master's in control of everything apart from the decisions the players make and where the dice fall. And, I mean, really, that's the story, right? Is all of us chuckle fucks bumming around the galaxy, getting into trouble, getting shot in the face, and
a lot.
I'm so sick of getting blinded, and we haven't recorded the follow up to the Devils of the West session where I got blinded in that game as well. We'll see how that goes.
No bitterness there at all.
Just blinded constantly. But like it's just really hard to like do NPCs that are that detailed and participating in every combat and really helping drive the story without sort of overbearing on the player characters. But you just really managed to pull it off with a whole bunch of different NPCs. Like, Scoos is such a big part of RP and some of the events that happen in the story and, like, sort of the skill set of the group. But he doesn't overbear on, like, the actual party. And it's still up to the party to solve all the problems and to solve the problems that Scoos causes.
To solve the problem that is Scoos.
Yes.
That is the better way to put it.
And Zadra is... Zadra, I made this joke at one point. Zadra exists to have plot visions. Because he just does multiple times. But like, Zadra's in a whole bunch of the combats, and he's a very dangerous combatant. He mostly killed Gracchus. I got the final hit, so I'm going to take credit for it. But he did most of the work. But he doesn't overbear on Matty G and Jocelyn being the force sensitives of the party, and he doesn't, he didn't overbear on, like, the rest of us doing sort of the missions that we're doing, stuff like that. And Skull is, another example of being sort of statted and played like a player character, but not. I mean, it helps that he's like it helps that he's a droid, so it's easier to sort of like RP him in the background.
Roger.
But he ends up feeling like such a complex character and a valued member of the team without just overbearing on everybody. And I'm just honestly so impressed that you not only managed to do it, but managed to do it with so many NPCs at the same time.
And it was very challenging and very intimidating because part of there kind of had to be a lot of NPCs in this story for the nature of how I wanted your guys' stories to go individually, and me wanting you guys to survive those stories. You, as a solo player going on big, complex bounty hunting missions early on by yourself, if you were doing that completely solo, it drastically changes the math on some of the combats and stuff I can fairly put you in. And so I need to have NPCs in your guys' backstories and in your guys' like solo stories to be essentially extra turns in initiative
right.
to help you out or to give skill sets you need and don't have necessarily. But then all of a sudden these stories combine and there's 5 players and there's still all those NPCs because they don't just go away.
Well, and by that
So
point,
that was a little
by that point they've been so well liked and they're so intrinsic to different stories and to different characters that it's like, oh, we've got a new crazy Russian nesting doll of suicide missions. Come on, boys.
Let's go.
Yeah,
There we go.
all right, you go get your NPC buddy. Does everybody have their NPC buddy?
Grab your NPC buddy.
Realistic, like
Your
I
NPC
mean,
buddy by your side
to get
all
down
the
to
time.
technical, outside of Scoos,
We
Like-
we almost didn't have schools.
yeah. Well,
You wanted to pick the lame droid.
because I was thinking stealthily, but I was like, well, I think the droid would be perfect for stealth. What do you think? I like Scoos, and I just didn't. I like Scoos. You said that, and I didn't want to argue with you, so I was like, all right, we're going with Scoos. But realistically, Badger didn't have an NPC like assistant really. Granted, his solo stuff was like he only saw action for like a short period of time. It was more of just a daring escape. And when we did combine our stories, Scoos technically became your NPC buddy.
By the end of the story, he was both of your NPC
Schools
buddies.
was Tobaku's best good friend.
Best good friend.
It's well, it's
Outside of his nerves.
Scoos in particular. Is obviously I'm a huge fan of Skull, not just because I think he's cool. I think the idea of him was always cool, but like the dice decided to tell terrifying and cool stories about Skull.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the fact that he just like couldn't fail a stealth roll, so it's just
Even
like
though he's this big, heavy-duty battle droid.
it's just like, but he's unnervingly silent. And the fact that like somebody did finally make a lightsaber attack against him, which because of the way the dice fell was flat nothing. So whether he had the cortosis or not, it wouldn't have mattered.
But in the moment.
But it told a cool story of the lightsaber just like hitting him and doing nothing, and then he got to just like punch that
face in.
Flopsy and Skull, just both of them just one punching everybody to death constantly. I'm a huge fan of Skull, but like Scoos in particular, the way he just he just co-opted the whole Artifacts of the Grey campaign in such a funny way. Like, it's just everything. They're like, all right, like, you need to tell Scoos he can't come with us on this stealth mission. We still quote it constantly. You just walk up to him being like, Scoos, and he's just like, yeah, man.
Really
Pretty excited about the mission. And it's just like, okay, now I need to tell him. It's that. It's the getting stabbed by the scorpion. It's the
It's the getting too thorough with him that he doesn't help in the
or not being.
It was
thorough.
him literally blowing up a man.
It's just like
Two bits.
and like it just like revealing people's secrets that they didn't really want to mention at the time.
At least not yet.
With Badger's lightsaber. And then like Erickson tearing up as Scoos when everybody's saying goodbye to him at the end. And Matty G made,
Damn Imperial, you would have betrayed us anyway.
it's like I'm watching Erickson try not to cry at the table, RPing as Scoots, and it's like, and that's a kind of a profound moment when that happens. Playing a tabletop RPG, and it's to me, and it's Matty G. When we're done recording and kind of breaking everything down and just hanging out, where Matty G said, "I'm honestly mad how much I like Scoots." like it just comes around so quick, and he grows on everybody so quick that it's like even when it's like Scoos is about to ruin everything, it's like he's still just like, yeah, but we're gonna die for him though.
He manages to be endearing.
Well, we had one of those instances where he almost got us killed because of his mouth. Because we're going to the I forget the raptor planet.
It's
to Charles.
To Charles.
Charles.
Something along those lines.
One of my future characters in one of these campaigns is going to be one of those sentient raptors because the artwork for them looks so cool.
Yeah, it looks really good. But we're landing, and they're like, okay, just land at this dock. hey, up your... It wasn't even
Don't
that.
tell me what to do or whatever
Like,
he said.
he was like, hey, up yours. It's like, Scoos, what are you doing? I'm a rebel, man.
He's like, I don't like being told what to do. I'm a rebel, man.
I'm a rebel.
And I liked the idea of him as this character who's like this complete, like, obviously crazy person who's like he's the crazy explosives expert, which is a classic kind of semi-tropey character.
He ends up being somewhere between Mole and Vinny
and
from
Vinny
Atlantis.
Yeah.
He kind of rides that line very well. But like at the same time, it was important to me, and you saw it at the end, that like he was a rebel for the right reason. Like he was a true rebel, even if he was a complete goofball who seems like he's got no real motive or mission behind him. Like at the end of the day, he's not just like, I hate the Imperial. Like, he's a true rebel. And he's like, I'm a rebel because I don't like these guys telling me what to do. I want to be on the Outer Rim doing whatever the hell I want, blowing up what I want, and these Imperials are telling me what to do. I won't have it. He was like, I wanted this true rebel. And Scoos was honestly my attempt to do Jar Jar Binks right. Like, I wanted to have a comic relief character in the story, because there's going to be moments that it got dark, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I wanted this kind of goofy, fun NPC without detracting from the story and without taking the spotlight too much.
Well, and that's, the ending had real potential to be quite serious and be quite dark. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of horrific injuries suffered. Some characters very barely survive.
Yeah.
The Star Wars RPG system is a hard one to die in.
It is.
But
Savage
brutal.
World, yeah, Savage World is relatively easy to die in. D&D is relatively easy to die in. It's really hard to have a player character die in the Star Wars RPG system. That's a good thing and a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I feel like it kind of reaches the point where it's just like, I've once more survived being nuked. But losing player characters can feel bad. I don't think this story would have been as good if we had lost a player character along the way. Mm-hmm. So the ending in particular is like, it's very
don't mind me,
quietly adjusting the camera.
I didn't bump anything.
It's because not only is it like Matty G and Jocelyn having this showdown with a couple of NPCs that that they really want to kill. Mm-hmm. It's Badger having a showdown with an NPC he really wants to kill. It's a ghost from Zadra's past rising up. Like, it had the potential to be very serious and very dark and very emotional. It may well have been if the villain had gotten the chance to make his speech. There's really, in my mind, three things that keep the ending in line with the rest of the campaign, is just being like mixing dark and goofy, and it's like, this is serious and should have your attention, but look at this goofy shit going on over there. And that's Scoos. Mm-hmm. Raiden being there like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, just like...
it was Raiden and Tobaku.
Tobaku's only real buy-in is like, fuck the Empire, so here's some Empire, so fuck them. I'm involved in this fight just because they're Imperials, and I've sworn eternal warfare upon all Imperials. But the third part of that is Manus being given a moment to be serious, to have this cool back and forth moment. And Matty G has done an excellent job in Devils of the West at still being funny at times and being kind of goofy, but playing this really understated, excellent serious character. Mm-hmm. It's very much a less is more type of character. Jerry and I talked about this for a while.
Yeah.
And it's super impressive what he's managed to do with Mohan with very little. And Manus is not that character at all. So it's like...
Well, Manus is a punk-ass teenager.
Exactly.
Plays him like a punk-ass
Mohan being... Or a character like Mohan being in that conversation, with the Inquisitor, would have been very interesting to see. But instead, the Inquisitor's just he's almost disappointed father, man, and then he just flips him off. And, you just kind of stutter-stepping and being like... then I guess you all die. It's just that, it just takes so much of the gravity out of the situation and movies learned that a long time ago, when somebody's about to do something serious and somebody else just flips them off. But then it still ends up being this just, really cool, cinematic, excellent fight, which somehow Raiden came out of almost completely undamaged, which I'm
Raiden, Tobaku, and...
the people who were fighting at range the entire time tended to do well because you guys cleared the ads so quick, and a lot of the basically it was like the big heavy hitters were either melee characters or a guy who was trying to tie off a loose end, and that loose end was Commander Badger.
Yeah.
And that's the dude who had the disruptor rifle. That was the ISB agent, Agent Stygian, who was trying to finish what he started, which was, again, back to other players' backstories, Operation Excision, and removing this.
And honestly,
clone.
I'm kind of glad that the mysterious hooded figure wasn't. And you said you had kind of considered it being like Biala or something, which wouldn't have surprised me. I wouldn't have been Raiden would have been it's just like you. It's like nobody sells me out. It's like you're dying for this, but I'd also would have been like, you're still just up to all your old tricks. You just won't change. I'm glad it wasn't that. I'm glad it wasn't this sort of forced attempt to make it someone from Raiden's past or somebody from or Tobaku's past. And I'm also
who in Tobaku's past was ratting him out. He was just a simple nerd.
There's only 3 people in my past.
It was
one of those is you.
Shan Braith. It's the old farmer that you rode up to the Sky Market with. He pulls it off. It's Darth Braith.
He pulls off his hood, and it's actually one of his nerfs.
You left me. You left us.
Joined the Imperial. There's.
We were like brothers.
You wouldn't have. You didn't. All right. Admittedly, you didn't have all that many options there, but
But I didn't want to force something.
Right, and I was kind of hoping it would be like when he ran into the Imperial Historian, where he's standing there all menacing at the bottom of the steps, and he just goes, "Please don't shoot." Part of me wanted it to be that so bad, where we do this whole huge dramatic fight, and this guy's just standing there stoically the whole time, only to have us end the fight. And he goes, "Please don't shoot." Would have been great, but I'm glad it was somebody from somebody's past that brought some buy-in, and I'm also kind of glad that it's this dramatic reveal, and everyone goes, "Who the fuck is this?" You know what I mean? It's like Commander Badger and Raiden looking at each other, "Do you know?" And looking at the Force sensitives, and they're like, I don't know.
And then you hear, and then you look over and Zadra is wide-eyed. It's all, it's him.
But
everyone besides Zadra is just John Travolting. And then they say, they're like, oh, this is Zadra's backstory.
Part of me was also wondering if you were just going to throw another wrench for Badger's backstory, and somehow Commander Hyde was still alive, and it was him, so...
Commander Hyde, for those here that don't know who the hell Commander Hyde is, Captain Hyde. He was another clone trooper who was stationed on the Titan, who was the officer who basically Badger was pretty sure he witnessed right before he got excised, right before he was killed and removed from duty permanently. That could have been an interesting twist to throw in there. I wanted it to... For combat math, in a lot of ways, I wanted an additional character, and I had made some decisions about Zadra's backstory that made it pretty easy.
No, and for combat reasons, it totally makes sense. Honestly, I expected for combat math there would be more stormtroopers. The stormtroopers and the purge troopers did not last long anyway.
And I kind of expected a volley to just incinerate the stormtroopers. They were kind of there to eat a round or two of attacks. The purge troopers were pretty hardy. The individual purge troopers took a couple, 2-3 shots from some of you.
When we fought them before, they were relatively tough. When I ran purge troopers, I was just I need to upgrade stormtroopers. Well, I'll use this Imperial Sergeant stat block, which has 3 times as many hit points and stuff like that. And I think that's a good place to start. I think you did something a little more hardcore, which
it was comparable, but what I did is I found an online resource that I'd love to share with people, but I couldn't. I'd have to find it again, and that's too much effort. Somebody made stat blocks for commander, a stun baton, a stun hammer, and stun something else. 4 different boss level basically purge trooper stats. And I modified the commander, which is just a rifle bearing one of them, down in scariness, and turned that into my base level purge trooper, and then had the hammer purge trooper be their commander.
No, and I felt like it worked well. And it's kind of hard to as a player to go into how well DM stat lines worked necessarily, but
I feel like they felt appropriately challenging.
And it's there's definitely, you can tell a difference when you shoot one of those compared to shooting a regular
Because you have to do it more.
For me, it's the same number of rounds. It's just
more of your auto fighters.
More modifiers, yeah. Which was like, I don't know, like necessarily what we want to talk about next. That was when I started. That was not necessarily the build I had in mind. With Raiden, even the Mandalorian armor thing was something that came up relatively late. As far as like, you know what? I think I kind of want to get a set of Mandalorian armor. Like, I found the stat blocks in one of the expansion books. It's like, it's also just kind of a cool idea, and like Raiden wants to be a bounty hunter, and he wants to be a good bounty hunter. And he's like, what do the best bounty hunters use? The best bounty hunters use Mandalorian armor. You know, and it's like, you know, and then like him sort of actually becoming a Mandalorian was something I never really like expected, but like I think that became very interesting, and it was really just, you know, working down through the skill list and finding multiple mods or abilities that are like, oh, I can reduce the cost of an effect by 1, so I can make auto fire cheaper. And then I just kept doing that until auto fire just costs 1. I have 2 mods that are adding +1 advantage on every attack. So it's just like, this roll is only to success, which means 3 people get hit for 14 damage.
And it was pretty insanely brutal. It definitely helped large combats be winnable, because you could decimate
we
parts
reached
of
the point where you essentially told me that I wasn't allowed to keep buffing the blaster rifle at that point. It's like, it's like, okay, like, it's like, don't just spend all your upgrade points on making the blaster rifle scarier, because like auto fires, I believe you said like, if we do this again, we are probably going to change one of the rules somewhere, because like, rules as written, this works. We're probably not doing it again, which is why I just stopped putting any levels into my like ranged heavy check. Because I mean, look, as a player, you want to feel powerful. You want to do a lot of damage. You want to like, you know, it's cool. Or you know, if you're actually rolling on the tabletop and not using a digital dice app, which for the Star Wars system you just should. It's fun to roll lots of dice. I love playing assassin rogues and, you know, super critting people. But when you were like, we can't keep doing this, it was like, no, you're totally right. Like, this is it's fun, but it's kind of broken. So like, which is why I started, you know, dipping a lot heavier into mechanic, especially since you were like, the campaigns are about to combine. It's good if people have varieties of skills and can kind of fill roles.
And I kind of voiced that out to all the separate groups and wanted it to be very clear, like, and I hope it was kind of apparent as the groups combined, and like you guys, especially once you start being in chess space, like all of a sudden there's potentially going to be computers checks that are going to be very difficult. And I didn't want you guys to go into this and be like, man, the boss fight's going to be easy, but we're never going to make it there because we can't get through 3 of the doors in our way. Or like, we have to talk our way out of a situation. None of us spec'd into anything besides fighting, so we're screwed. And so I knew that there was the potential for, if you guys are doing like some circuitous route, like Rapacious Path, perhaps, where there's going to be a lot of piloting required, some mechanics required, some co-piloting required, or if you guys go head on, I had a little blurb written by what the Chiss commander was going to say to you as you approached his blockade, just in case. And in that situation, you guys were going to have to talk out your ass to make it through something like that. And I'm like, somebody's going to have to be really good at communicating. So I wanted to verbalize that to everybody and be like, start specializing in things other than combat, because a lot of that stuff's going to come up. And I think everyone did a pretty good job, and I feel like a lot of niches were hit. And those that weren't hit by player characters that were like maybe not as interesting of ones, perhaps, were easy to fill with NPCs as well. Like, no one was very good at astrogation. You had 2 astromechs.
Well, you know, a lot of times in playing a Star Wars RPG, there isn't... I guess it depends on the campaign, but there's not necessarily a lot of times where you're going to be rolling astrogation checks. And Star Wars players anyway are like, let's buy an astromech droid.
Everyone wants to have an R2-D2. Of course you do.
Yeah. Nate, love that guy. R3, hate that guy.
Nate's a great guy. Nate is great. R3 is.
Hey, I feel personally attacked as the person who is R3. If the Force,
but you should feel very happy because you were also the guy who was Nate.
That's right. If the Force sensitive, if Flopsy was here, they both liked R3. R3, you know, he was just an old bitter war veteran, and that's something you got to respect.
we had enough of those in the.
We had that was the one thing, we had so many war veterans.
So many bitter old war vets.
We had
from both sides, from like all three sides.
Yeah, we had a clone trooper, a Jedi, an astromech, and then who else? And then battle droid.
And a battle droid, yeah. There's a lot of, and I liked how the different characters' backstories and stuff were tangentially related. So all of a sudden, you know, you and Skull are like fist bumping, like not too bad for a clanker, you know, and stuff like that. And Zadra and you. And,
yeah, that was just gonna say you and Zadra having a conversation about like, look, we both fought in the war. We both fought each other in the war.
at the end of
Like
it.
I have killed two of you.
Like we know what each other are. Let's get through this without killing each other. Like it really does give rise to you know, really pretty excellent moments like that.
Yeah, and like going back to the whole specking thing, it was kind of always my goal for Badger, just for him to be that kind of balanced character. Main reason because, for one, it's a character decision. You know, anything in regards to clone troopers, our troopers especially are always specialized for specific things, so it kind of helps that he was the jack of all trades because he was, i.e., the commander of his group, and it just played into statting him out a lot easier because it's like, okay, I know which ones theoretically he would have based off of the type of character who he is.
And he filled into a lot of roles.
Yeah.
As like somebody in social situations, somebody piloting combat situations, a commanding officer in combat situations, medical roles. Like there was multiple times where your ability to kind of slot in as like, I'm not exceptional at this, but I'm pretty good at it, and nobody else is good at it at all, so I can fill these mini multitude of gaps. And the character like that was super useful.
Well, and it was one of those deals, too, where before we even did the combination, it was coming into play because we had several encounters where nobody would have talked to us had I not been wearing the Imperial-style armor.
You leveraged that a couple different times to great effect.
Yes, I did. And it played a factor, especially in a group where we have a scruffy nerf herder and Scoops.
It's also like it's something I ran into a little bit. It's something that me and the Force Sensitives ran into a lot. It's something that you three ran into a lot when we were just doing audio recordings and just kind of screwing around to fill time with a Star Wars game. It's a really good idea to have somebody in the party that can wear Imperial armor and bullshit their way through a situation. Because, like, that moment of, like, all right, I got an idea. Somebody will dress up like a stormtrooper and like, you know, we'll talk our way in, or they'll walk in or get to this point or whatever. And it's like, we have a snake man, a wolf man,
a little green man,
a punk-ass kid,
and a Yeti.
Huh. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, or back in the day doing the like Grey Squadron campaign, where it's like, it's a Bothan, a Nautilin, and a Gamorrean,
and we're trying to infiltrate this Imperial base.
This isn't the setup to a joke.
Oh. This episode is ruined.
Start over. Everybody remember
Hey,
that?
welcome to the...
Whoops, sorry.
You know, like, just like, and like being in missions kind of built for some amount of like infiltrating Imperial outposts. Like, you know, it's just like, it's not a bad idea to like, I mean, it's not a bad idea anyway to be that player at the table who's like, you all make the characters you want and I'll fill a role. Eric's and I can both be that way. Eric's and I are also both strong components of don't fill roles. Nobody gives a shit about party comp. Play the character you want to play. The story will be interesting anyway. But we're also both willing to fill roles. We hold a lot of double standards when it comes to tabletop RPGs.
That's what most elitists do.
Yeah.
But like, Yeah, it's just like like hearing that like you guys are able to actually just successfully do that when like it's just like, oh, we never got that option.
Well, like for in our instance, when we were doing, it was still just ours, the mission where we had to go steal the pretty much X-wings for the rebels. Pretty much the Imperial armor came in handy because I was able to just talk my way into like, listen, I'm with the Empire. You either show me around or we're gonna have some serious problems. And granted, it almost backfired on me and with the engineers because they didn't want to answer me because they were like
the people who are intentionally like basically leaving their company to join the rebellion thought he was actually part of the Empire, and so then when he was questioning them and they're like, oh, I don't know anything about traitors. No, I don't know anything about traitors. So and he's like, I'm here to help. Are you guys the traitors? And they're like, no. They're like, this dude just like came in here saying he was here to like hunt and root out us, and now he's asking if we are us, and we're like, nope, sure are. Not
so it took me.
Nice try though.
It took
you sly Imperial dog.
It took me shooting the like. Took me shooting like the factory manager, killing him. And then the explosion going off, and me having to say, I'm with Shulo, or I've been sent by Shulo. Are you my people or not? Oh yeah, that's totally.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah, when you put it that way.
Our tactic of you being an Imperial and then me and Scoos being your vessel.
Yeah,
flawless tactic.
I love that too because you guys are infiltrating this base and you're like moving into the hangar, and this is another one of my favorite Scoos moments where you're like, all right, I turn to tell Scoos this is probably where he should start to like branch off, and I'm like, you turn around and Scoos is gone.
This is where
that's how we truly understood who
that's
Scoos
when
was.
he spoke about an explosion elsewhere in the facility. There you go. That was truly lesson number 1 in be specific with Scoos.
It all worked out. There was just like 2 families that didn't have their dads come back.
Technically,
one of which didn't die in the explosion. Scoos just stole his ship and flew out there.
Yeah,
so that guy didn't have a ship to fly away in.
Technically 3. But yeah, and it led to probably my favorite moment in our campaign where I walk up to Scoos, what happened? What happened to the pilot that was supposed to be flying the ship? Well, I see 1, 2... No, the one that was flying this specific ship in here. I flew this ship. It's like, well, we just lost 3 people and 2 ships. That's great.
Rebel pilots are a dime a dozen. It's fine.
They'll take any farm kid, you know?
I mean, you learned that very well. That's something else to talk about here. Something I really loved about this system specifically, with these separate campaigns, is it allowed me to run a Force and Destiny, a Age of Rebellion, and an Edge of the Empire story, and then combine them. And I felt like the Rebel story felt, especially from Tobaku's perspective, like a classic Rebel story. And I felt like the Force and Destiny was a classic Force and Destiny, and I felt like Edge of the Empire was like literally the young street thug who wants to be a bounty hunter rising up and getting his own ship and starting bounty hunting.
If somebody ever with any clout at Disney ever watches through the series and decides to, you know,
John Favreau.
John Favreau.
John Favreau.
Please.
Dave Filoni.
If anybody here knows John Favreau.
John Favreau, if you're a subscriber, or if any of your friends or family are,
we would love to turn
make the Erickson Expanded Universe canon.
Just like Raiden's TV show, the first chunk of Raiden's TV show will look more like a season of Sons of Anarchy than a Star Wars show. Because, I mean, the first few episodes are like that sort of grounded and gritty, and it's literally just like conflict between street gangs in Nar Shaddaa. You know, which is why it's so funny where like Raiden reaches this point where he's just like up to the eyeballs in Space Wizard bullshit, and he's standing there John Travoltaing while like just like Inquisitors and specialty Imperial troopers and like this punk ass kid and like everybody's got like this like everyone's this is their moment for vengeance on both sides, and it's just like Greg is just kind of there. That's a really fun tradition and their transition, and yeah, like we've talked a lot about it. Wouldn't have had that impact if it had been.
We just kind of started and
if it's just you and I had decided on a backstory,
which it definitely helps because it builds up, it leads up to
drink refill. Anybody?
I love it.
I'll take a Dr. Pepper cherry.
Alright.
Dr. Tookie.
I'll take a shoot. I gotta loosen the mouth up a little bit. Let's do a beer.
Go get my fucking. I gotta do chicken. Give me a fucking.
Sandwich. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. If any of you hadn't seen, there is a mini fridge tucked in that closet over there. That's where we get all the cans of stuff.
Of infinite Montuckies.
If John Favreau or Frederick P. Montucket are watching this, we would love a partnership with either.
Just send us money. But going back to what I was saying, like, it kind of makes those last moments where Skoos and Tobaku finally warm up to their Imperial buddy and rescue him from being stabbed to death.
Together, too, which was
Together,
very cool.
That was a good story moment. That was...
Like Skoos shouting, get off my friend, or my Imperial friend.
That was our resolution. Like, cause like obviously, me and Skoos didn't have any sort of like past to reckon with, other than that random stormtrooper
that you're pretty sure was one of the guys who kicked your teeth in. On the Sky
you never checked the boot. Like for the you never measured the boot on.
Oh, that was him, all right.
Well, especially because I'm a snake person. Like, well, I don't know much about snake anatomy, but I feel like it's more likely to have an imprint of something.
Well, you're a snake, but your head is that of essentially a Wookiee.
Yeah.
So it'd probably be thicker.
I ain't no Wookiee in there.
Anyway, like. It was just one of those.
I haven't gone to that part of the internet, thank God.
It was just one of those moments though where it had a lot of impact because it had been Badger pretty much dragging along Tobaku and Skoos on these missions, and them always giving Badger shit for being Imperial.
Or at the end of the day, you were their rebel buddy.
Yeah.
They treated you as a comrade. Excuse me, and they cared for you as a comrade, even if they were like, I don't know about this Imperial.
Well, Tobaku kind of got over his Imperial rage until he showed back up to his farm. And
which I get, like, speaking of characters who, like, in a fairly understated way are amazing in roleplay situations, I love Tobaku as this, like, grumbly old man who everyone does like, well, what do you think, Tobaku? I don't know about it.
Yes.
I just got a grumbly, grouchy old dude.
That's that first Artifacts of the Grey episode. It's one of my favorite moments. Is the like the two sort of adults in the room are like, we're here to meet a contact. What we're trying to do is extremely illegal. Like. But this is like a casino planet, like, this isn't even really an old friend of mine, but, like, I guarantee you she'll talk to us. So, like, we need to go talk to this person. We need to, like, get this information. It's like, just Manus, stay out of trouble. And keep an eye on Flopsy. And he just goes, and he's just like, you got it, sir. And then he just, like, shoves Flopsy onto the dance floor and runs off to gamble.
And Badger being like, keep an eye on the kids. And you're like, watch them, you're like,
Are they like?
His
question were, are children like Nerfs? And I'm just like, yes.
Oh yeah, this
well, then I
easy,
can
man.
walk.
And he just
takes out the stun whip.
like I just love that, like, stay out of trouble. Keep an eye on Flops. Yes, sir. Immediately disregards all orders. And like we talked about, it's like, I feel like that you got it, sir, had an implied you're not my real dad bolted onto center. And then the immediate, like, reckon kids are anything like Nerfs.
Yes.
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 As a badger knows anything about kids.
Or nerfs.
Or nerves.
Something I'd like to bounce back to really quickly, because it's something that we briefly talked about after the last episode was recorded, but didn't do on camera at all. And that is kind of the way the final combat resolved, and how I was both excited and disappointed by it. And I'm happy with how everyone seemed to really enjoy it. The ending seemed good. But, like, part of me has this, like, storyteller in him who wants, like, Manus to strike down Drakkar and wants you to strike down Stygian and everyone to have their, like, revenge moment. And in some ways it didn't feel like that happened because, like, you killed Stygian and you killed Drakkar and Skull killed Zadra's old apprentice and, like, all these, like, characters.
He had a really, like, hot topic kind of name, too,
Intentionally,
didn't
he did. Let me tell you about
Vale or something like that?
Yeah, Vale Rife.
Yeah.
Vale Rife.
Yeah. It's a very Star Wars name, but it's also a very, like, I'm edgy, the dark side force wielder kind of name.
Yeah.
Look, Darth Vale just doesn't quite work.
Not quite. Darth Rife is fine.
Better, I guess.
That's almost as good as Darth.
I think Manus. There's a very real chance that Manus, even blinded, would have been able to kill Drakkar. Because Drakkar was so low. And I didn't realize he was that low until, like, I hit him. And it was just like, well, a billion T damage is more than 2. It's like, oh, okay. You're right. Thematically, like, there were a lot of fights set up, and it would have been nice to
there's
see
These
sort
weenies
of
got
resolve that way.
down. You had to clean it up.
Well, like there was a little bit to Badger's back, like, kind of character that we didn't touch on a lot, and I kind of wish I paid attention to it more. Was the whole idea for Badger was he still had his inhibitor chip, so it was malfunctioning. So it would malfunction. He'd get headaches. From a thematic point, as far as, like, Badger's story goes, it's like, oh, during that fight he got a headache, caught off guard, Stygian capitalized, and then
Something like that, maybe.
something along those
The
lines.
thing, too, though, and we discussed this afterwards, is it felt like a resolution to your story because, in the end, it wasn't your combat prowess that overcame Stygian. It was the fact that you joined this rebellion, you made these friends, you had these allies on your side, they backed you up while you're getting stabbed by this maniac.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was a very cool resolution moment in and of itself. We also, though, like, Drakkar nearly striking down Manus, and again, like, the friends he made, and, like, him not falling to the dark side, like him having friends and him being a good person is what kind of saved him in the end. Somewhat good person. A punk kid, but a good person. And it also left him with these brutal scars that make him this, when we talked about, like, he was probably, turns into this very, like, somewhat brutal, and, like, he's, like, the bad cop of their teaching duo as they start their new order.
Flopsy's over here, like, hugging the judge, and it's okay. Manus just kicks him in the head. What the hell was that?
and I love the idea of, it's like, it's years down the line, Raiden and his mercenary team are finishing up a job, like, they get back to the Hammerhead, and, like, the guy who's been on comms in the Hammerhead to, like, essentially, like, you got a message? Like, Mr. Raiden, you got a message? Like, it's from some guy named Zadra? Like, it's just like, oh, shit.
What now?
Call him, like, because, like, I just...
You tell him if he says anything about Grockus's tower, I've got an ass-kicking leg to show him.
Well, we just, like, like, Raiden building this Mandalorian order, that's part of what they do is hunt down Inquisitors, and having these connections to this group of kind of outlawed Force sensitive, to me, is a really cool pairing. Just, like, reaching the point where it's like, we had an apprentice, like... We had, like, we sent 2 apprentices out on a mission. One of them has been captured, and the other one is, like, in hiding. There's an Imperial blockade, and it's like, the Inquisitors are here. Like, we know the Inquisitors grabbed this kid. It's like, and Zadra just being like, I gotta make a call.
I know a guy. He won't come cheat, but he owes me a favor.
He owes several favors.
Well, just like Raiden being like, yeah, we got some new initiates that need to be run through their paces. It's like, all right, we're on the job. And then, like, actually, like, some kid sitting in an Imperial prison cell. He's been captured by Inquisitors. Maybe he's been there for days. Like, maybe he's been tortured. And then just, like, a bunch of Mandalorians in black armor like open like the prison cell door, and they're like, all right, come on. Like and there's just dead people everywhere. Like the ship's probably half destroyed, and it's just like, what in the fuck? It's like, yeah, Zadra called. He told us he went.
He saved me. I got lost in the snow once, and he saved me. I owed him a favor.
It's like, oh, how's Manus doing? Is he still punk ass kid? It's like old man Manus. No, it's like, oh Jesus, been a long time.
Mm-hmm. I liked
Badger. That Imperial's still twitching. Kill him.
Blast. Well, I liked how there was some cool ending moments with like your guys' stories and where everyone like. The fight had some moments where it's like, yeah, I wish this person killed this person, but it still all felt fine.
Well, and I think...
And the end stories were very cool, and the paths people were going to go on were very cool.
I mean, if you want to get down and technical, Stygian twitched and Badger cut his head off with the lightsaber.
Well, and that's... it's also just tabletop RPGs. Like, the dice fall where they will, you know what I mean? Like...
This isn't Savage Worlds where we get a Benny and we can re-roll.
Well, and even then the dice will fall where they will quite often. You know what I mean? Like, it's... Tabletop RPGs have their own storytelling. Quite often the dice will fall in just super dramatic and cinematic ways, which is part of what I love about playing tabletop RPGs. But, like, that's just kind of good advice for game masters is, like... The dice are just going sometimes to just do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And... fights aren't going to shake out the way that you want it. Fights that were supposed to be big and epic and interesting fights are not going to be that when the players just steamroll the boss, and sometimes really stupid, easy fights will very nearly wipe the party. Like, the dice do what the dice will do, and...
Roll with
it. Yeah.
No pun intended.
And that's just like... That final fight, I think, is just a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I feel like it was about as challenging as I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
People went down differently than I expected, or like, you know, there wasn't some of those moments, but there didn't need to be for it to still be a compelling kind of boss encounter for the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Post credits. Let's talk post credits. Does everyone feel like the post credits was happy, appropriate? Like, well, what are some of the decision making factors behind your guys' stuff? I know with the Force Sensitives, I very much set up for them to like make a great Force order if they want, because I knew that Matty G would find that rad. And so I threw that out there and they jumped on it, and that's awesome. But for your guys', were you happy with the situations at the end and how that built?
I mean,
for your post credits?
I mean, as far as like for Badger goes, like he was always only helping the rebels because he kind of had no other choice. It was either do that or go on the run by yourself, which is probably not the best move. So I like the idea of him joining up with Raiden's Inquisitor hunting group, and him also being the one to help train initiates. And also I just like the idea of like clone armor being dunked in Beskar to just look super
like
rad.
Beskar ARC Trooper, like ARC Trooper meets Mandalorian armor would be
yeah.
I'm happy with where Raiden ended up. You know, it wasn't necessarily exactly what I had in mind, like when the game started, but it's pretty close. I suppose the thing that I'm the most disappointed in, but I'm also to some degree happy that it didn't happen. I sort of expected Raiden's whole view of the galaxy to start shifting, that like predator-prey mindset, but I don't really think it did. There were kind of moments where it got shaken a little bit, but quite often something else would happen immediately afterwards that would just like
build his resolve.
reaffirm his resolve. So it was like, part of me was kind of hoping that he would kind of go through that change a little bit, or something like it, but just like, I don't really feel like that did happen. That's probably more on me than anything, but overall I'm happy with it. It's always just so nice to bring a campaign to a legitimate conclusion. Like, I really hate it when campaigns get abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm just happy that like we reached the end of a game and told the story and everything.
I also think it was probably a good thing for like, as far as like my character for Badger to give up the lightsaber to
that was a great cool moment.
To go to the initiates. So like the handshake where the lightsaber is just kind of in between and just It slides it over to Zadra.
It's like this is a terrible metaphor. I see it as what that Pepsi commercial intended to do. Like a very it's like you handing that lightsaber to him was this very poetic moment of like your almost like your apology for what happened, even though it was out of your control, and this like acknowledgement of like respect between each other, even though the story of the universe would make you guys natural enemies. Yeah. It's this like very resolving moment of that situation. Terrible metaphor for it's what that Pepsi commercial was trying to do and failed to do. Yeah. But done right and well, and I thought it was an awesome ending moment for sure. How about Tobaku's? His kind of fluctuated at the end.
It did. Well, because I had a couple of different things I wanted to do, but I knew I could only do one of them. So I decided to roll. It was either go back to my nerfs or join Raiden's group. But like the whole idea was
glad not everybody joined. It would have been kind of fun if literally everybody had just been like, fuck it.
Let's go be
Let's go be pirates or whatever.
But we're pirates, man.
I'm a pirate, man. He's literally wearing a tricorn hat and a fancy coat. Like, I'm a pirate, man.
A pirate, man.
But he's got slug throwers that look like flintlock pistols.
That is such an awesome Star Wars character idea. A space pirate who's actually a pirate. But he's like a little green man. Oh, that's awesome.
It talks like that.
But anyways, I guess the roles turned out were good because I think that was the best story. And then we were just talking about it, and I'm like, we were talking about him going back and his nerf field is destroyed. I'm like, that sounds like a good idea. 20 or under, and I rolled it and it was 18, and I was like, you know what? Turned out that was actually probably the best story because cinematically, when you just imagine it, he just finally gets back and he just wants to be with his nerfs, and he it's just all in flames, diamond pearls. So then he gets to go back and hang out with his buddy Scoos, and the moment between Scoos and that whole deal, like Scoos, and that was sad.
It was like legit sad. For how goofy of a character he was, and how like it's this fake situation with an absolute clown of a character who, but at the moment of him like, probably would have betrayed us anyways, like trying to like that like,
and then I lean in, it's like, I heard what you said in the redoubt. You totally want to blow you the heck up.
What makes Scoos and Tobaku's relationship really cool is because they're opposite people with the exact same values.
That's very well put. So this like curmudgeon old man and this like absolute goofball weirdo character, but you are both like your views are very in line.
That's what I like about like Raiden and Zadra.
That's a very interesting thing too.
They're so similar in the way they approach problem solving and like even in some of their worldview. But Zadra is trying so hard to be the Jedi Master and to like help these kids turn out good, and Raiden just doesn't give a shit. And like so there's constant like Raiden constantly calling Zadra on some of his like mysticism bullshit is fun, and like there's moments where it's like Zadra. Like I think it was in that same first episode where a bunch of us were hiding in the cockpit to get away from Vibro Country, where it's like Manus, like Raiden and Zadra, and it's like Zadra giving this like actual speech about like sort of force versus like the force versus like just force or strength and like finding balance, and Raiden being like it's predator and prey, it's everything, it's one or the other, sometimes you're one, sometimes you're the other, like there's a lot of value in knowing where you stand, and it's like just like both like talking to Manus like from like in either ear. Like I just really love those moments, and like I'm really amazed at how similar Raiden and Zadra ended up being, despite once again being still very different characters.
It is like Zadra intentionally was like not a very good Jedi Master. Like I thought it'd be a very interesting story arc and very interesting character. It's like him during, like, if you have as much background stuff as you want, I can tell you for all sorts of different, and we can kind of do that later on. But Zadra was like during the war and stuff, he wasn't the heroic Jedi. He wasn't leading clone troopers into battle. He was kind of the like seedy, underhanded secret of the Jedi Order in a lot of ways. And he was kind of this failed Jedi Master already. Like, he was not the hero. Like, he wasn't the heroic master. That was Master Dagunji, which none of you ever met. And Master Dagunji was this wise old master who was teaching the kids. Zadra was the scumbag with a stealthy ship who was going around and, like, stealing kyber crystals and eliminating threats.
Well,
and
paying
people
somebody else to pay somebody else to steal.
He was the one who had friends in low places and was using those connections. Like, he was not the good person, and he didn't feel like he needed to be, because it's like, Master Dagunji is the good person who's going to save the Jedi Order. I'm just like during the war, I'm the scumbag who's here to make that go smoothly behind the scenes, but he's the heroic one. And all of a sudden, in their story, fairly early on, as Force and Destiny stories tend to go, the Master dies. And all of a sudden, this guy was like, shit, I'm not a hero, and I have to be this, like, wise master. And that's one of my favorite moments of the whole campaign collection, too, is Zadra speaking with you and being like, I don't know what this, like, unnecessary drive to, like, speak in riddles is, but as soon as you become a Jedi Master, you feel the need to be wise and to speak in this way, and he's like, I'm not very good at that.
That's the same conversation where Zadra made Raiden promise he'd help kill Manus if he turned to the dark side.
And that I felt like that was a good thing too with the end conflict of him like showing like there's a reason that he's scared of this, because his only apprentice he's ever had turned to the dark side, and he was a punk kid just like Manus.
and that's why I'm really happy that Skull and Raiden helped take the punk kid out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hit him for some amount of damage, but it's Skull that actually killed him. Because to me, it's kind of in some ways Raiden holding to that promise.
Yeah.
Of like, it's like, man, it seems like he's maybe doing okay, so we'll just target the other punk ass kid instead. Like, that's fulfilling the promise, right?
Well, it was also one of those cool moments too. Like, Zadra had a lot of cool moments where, especially with Badger talking with him for the first time around, it's like, we need to protect these kids. They are the future of the Jedi Order. Turning back around, seeing Flopsy pick up Scoos. Like, just the immediate question, like, really?
This is the future?
Manus just, like, quick drawing pistols. It
was this fun. I loved the, like, he's like, these are the brave young futures of my like order, and it's like they're not. They're like a dumb kid and a punk kid. That's what these two people are. It's like, yeah, but they are the heroic future of my order, and we gotta save them because that's literally all I've got.
There was only one thing like within the post credits that I kind of wish I had brought up beforehand, or wish I mentioned, and probably because it's probably gonna be, it would have come up like if we continue this. Probably for like Badger, one of the main things would be finding out and possibly rescuing Commander Hardlow or Ardell.
There you go.
I always mention
Hardlow.
Ardell's
not a bad last name for a character.
I think it was actually Soft High.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It's like, so like seeing what happened to him, because he pretty much saved my ass like every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he is the one who
he did.
Because he told me about Operation Excision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, so now I know they're gonna kill me, so I can plan to get off shift. We're leaving the planet to go to Dantooine to join the rebels, and he's the inspector, and he's like, nope, there's nobody here. After catching me in the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very end...
He was a character who only had a couple moments, a lot early on in your story, and then just brief things from there on. But I liked humanizing the Empire a little bit with him.
Yeah.
And, with your starting story in general, it was kind of humanizing the Empire. It was showing... I liked yours beginning because it's very much Empire in progress of like realizing what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Like the Empire early on is like we're the natural progression of the Republic,
mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden they realize, oh wait, no, we're the bad guys, and they kind of fit that mold.
Well,
and your like starting thing is like it was very intentional. Like the new Stormtrooper recruits that you had showing up, they were a lot more violent and a lot less thoughtful about the people they were there to protect.
Yep.
And like you were seeing that transition, and it's like moving away from these clones in a very brutal way.
Mm-hmm.
And like kind of seeing that shift. But there's still people in that they're like they're there because in their mind they're bringing peace and balance to the galaxy.
You know, and
prosperity.
that's why I like that, you know, Raiden had so little interaction with the Empire for so long in his campaign, and like really doesn't care either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's on the Imperial Registry as a bounty hunter, like both him and Skull, because it's like the Imperials give out bounty contracts as well. It's not just Hutts looking for smugglers who betrayed him. Like, you know, he's overall just like pretty ambivalent towards the Empire. You know, nothing that he necessarily does is out of any of this like particular hatred for the Empire. It's just that like sort of every goal that he's trying to accomplish, like along the way, ends up at odds with the Empire. He wants Mandalorian armor. He's gonna have to get it off of a Mandalorian who's working for the Empire on a planet, you know, essentially under Imperial blockade.
Well, it wasn't under blockade as much
Until
after you guys.
It was when we left.
Yeah, you left it under blockade.
Most of the time we were there, it was under blockade. You know, just like that's why, you know, it's like Alucard's like if I made that character decision early on of like, it's like, you know what? Yeah, sure, Alucard, I'll go with you right now. We'll go just put a hurting on the Empire. You know what? I'm in. Like. Like that would have just like totally changed stuff, but like Raiden doesn't. Raiden's like, yeah, like I appreciate what you're trying to do. You're trying to not be prey, and I can respect that.
But I already feel like I'm not prey. I don't need
to
do that.
Yeah, I don't really. If you want to hire me, sure. Apart from that, I'm gonna go my own way. Like, you know, it's just. So yeah, I think like, you know, yeah, kind of humanizing the Empire on one front. And having very much vilifying it for other characters, as well as having characters that are just kind of ambivalent, is interesting. And you only really get that because everybody has such different stories starting out.
I mean, a story that's directly at odds, a story that's directly in line with until they're at odds, and a story that's somewhat separate. It's very interesting to see those different aspects.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any behind-the-screen questions of, like, story stuff, character stuff, decisions, how something worked out the way it worked out, anything along those lines?
I want to know the story behind Skull's confirmed Jedi kill.
Oh,
because that is one of the many. I do also kind of want to know, like, how he went from being a bog standard B2 battle droid to being... what he is.
Yes.
So I don't. I assume those are kind of two different stories, but.
So, B2SC01 is a coding for like basically a first generation B2 battle droid. And the reason he had a Jedi confirmed kill marker on him, which is not necessarily a thing in the lore, but I thought it'd make sense and be rad, is because the backstory behind him is he was a B2 battle droid that was at the Battle of Geonosis. And he killed one of the Jedi that showed up, of the many that died in that fight, at the Battle of Geonosis, because he's part of this first generation. Eventually, he gets destroyed more or less and left in a scrap heap somewhere. And my backstory for him was basically that a pair of Mandalorian brothers found him and repurposed him into a bounty hunting assisting droid, and then eventually lost him in a game of Sabak to the Weequay you murdered and stole him from.
Which Weequay? I murdered quite a few Weequay.
the lead Weequay early in your story. So they basically, like, those Mandalorian brothers lost this droid in a high-stakes game of Sabak on Tatooine with that Weequay, and that's how Skull ended up there.
So that Weequay cheated.
Maybe. He might have won. I mean, Mandalorian's not necessarily known for their skill at Sabak.
As far as I know, that Weequay was kind of a backstabbing son of a bitch.
Yeah,
so
he was
he
pretty
could well have cheated.
He was from Tatooine. He was well respected in Tatooine, which means he was not a respectable person.
What organization did his organization have connections to? Was that the Pike Syndicate, or was it the Hutts?
His, I believe, was it? I believe his was
somebody had connections to the Pike Syndicate, and then I ended up very nearly shooting up a Pike Syndicate bar in order to get that brain in a jar.
I don't remember who had Pike connections. I know, so, like, I wanted to, especially in your story, introduce, like, crime syndicate drama. And so that's why, like, Black Sun Mercenary Company, the Nebula Syndicate you're working for was an up-and-coming mercenary company. They were at odds, and they wanted you to make a statement against Black Sun. The Pikes...
As well as just...
The Pikes are known for spice running. The Pikes, I think, had connections with the Nebula Syndicate.
Okay.
I think that's I believe that's was their kind of like spice source,
because,
and worked with your biker gang, the Nexaclaw gang. Not Nexaclaw, the Comets. The Viridian Comets, I think. That like speeder bike gang, they were basically the runners who sold that spice and gun run for the Pikes and for
Spice
the
running
Nebula
and gun
Syndicate.
running, I'm not sure.
So that's kind of where that all...
Because I just
all that
remember,
connection came
like,
together.
when Alucard wanted, like, when we reached the point where it's like, all right, we know where our brain in a jar is. It's in that Pike Syndicate bar. Was just like, it's just like, I'm pretty sure somebody I know has connections to the Pike Syndicate, so this might be a bad idea. But the Pike Syndicate are businessmen.
That's like... Being a Star Wars nerd helps a lot with like, running a game like this and knowing some of that and looking into some of that lore and stuff. But like, I wanted to, when you interact with these different syndicates, I wanted to make them feel like you're interacting with Hutts. They feel like Hutts. The Pikes, they're businessmen. They're business first. They're going to listen to reason and they're going to do whatever helps their bottom line.
Which is unfortunate because it meant that I kept having to make just like persuasion rolls instead of intimidation checks. It's like, and I said that at one point. I was like, I need to stop being reasonable with people because as soon as I start being reasonable with people, I'm much less likely to succeed.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Was it always your intention? And I'm going to keep bringing up Scoos because I have a lot of Scoos questions here.
I just want the full Scoos origin story.
2 movies.
Was it always...
And a miniseries.
Yes.
Was it always your
like
intention...
Lion King 1.5.
The Scoos 1.5.
Yeah, it's Artifacts of the Grey, episode 1.5. The Scoot story.
Hey man, you must be wondering how I got in these situations. No,
I want a Ferris Bueller's Day Off type movie, but with Scoos.
Was it always your intention to have Scoos be that character where we had to be super thorough with him? Like, anything we told him he was going to take almost to heart? Or
Scoos developed naturally. I think Scoos was a loose idea for the, like, crazy explosives expert character. I picked a race that I thought would be hilarious to be that character, and then I kind of thought about how he was going to talk. I literally looked at the picture of them, and I was like, I want him to talk, but when I talk as him, I need to pucker my lips and squeeze my eyes and go, yeah, I'm talking like this. No, and that's the character. And so, like, I wanted him to be weird and, like, whimsical and look like that when I spoke, and that was my, like, RP method. And from that point on, it was like, I thought I play NPCs like that as if I'm a player character playing them when I make their decisions.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the kind of character I've come up with. All right, he's weird. He's a loose cannon. He's going to do this thing. And that naturally progressed into Scoos, and he kept becoming more and more. Quick origin story of the name of Scoos. If any of you are Magic the Gathering nerds out there, you might have heard of a card called Scavenging Ooze, which is lovingly referred to in the Magic community as Scoos, and I loved that as a nickname or a name for a character, and so I just made up a ridiculous Star Wars name around the nickname Scoos. I wanted him to be called Scoos, so I was like, Framadayun Scoosanjo.
I'm going to be 100% transparent. I did not know what his name was.
The entire character.
When you first introduced him, because I didn't quite hear you, like because I was laughing at how ridiculous the name was and how he sounded. The only thing I ever picked up from him was his name was Scoos, but then as we progressed more and more,
a little bit of time.
I mean, I wanted it to be like when he first introduced himself. He's not like, I am Framadayun Scoos. It's like, Framadayun Scoosanjo. And then like reaches his hand and you're like, your holiday hoopy, what are you? Like that was the introduction I was.
You wanted us to have that Grinch moment. You're like, over to what?
You, me, and Matty G getting back into Divinity 2 recently, and you making this like bald, kind of goofy-looking elf, and watching in character creation your name change to Framadayun. It's just one of those like just purely organic like moments where it's like I'm going to sit here and laugh for 5 minutes, and it's like
the question is when you texted us the spelling for Framadayun Scoosanjo, when did you actually make up that spelling?
Before you met him. It's written in my notes for that. So, like, a lot of what I did before your guys' sessions is pick the NPCs you were likely to meet and have a name. Like, here's early on. Like, this is like the Alucard section. I have his name, a brief description of him, his ship, his droid friend, his pilot, and like I just have their names underlined and a little blurb underneath them so I can remember who they are. And that's literally as far as NPCs go in a lot of my notes, unless it's a more involved, like Inquisitor Jakara has a homemade stat block underneath him and stuff like that. But a lot of them, like, literally, this doesn't make any sense to either any of you three. Zubi Fablo, a Toydarian pit fighter trainer. That was kind of the guy who owned Flopsy at the beginning of the campaign. And it literally is Zubi Fablo, Toydarian pit fight trainer. And that's all it says. They did not kill him.
Oh.
They escaped with their lives from him and Zlilk, his Trandoshan heavy. But
I'd like that heavy to fight my heavy.
yours would win. Yours would win for sure.
I want to know what we were missing by not picking that droid instead of Scoos.
So what was his name?
What wasn't he like?
I remember like Alucard
He was
had,
like a
a
little
search and
caterpillar
rescue
droid
which
kind of
sounds really
deal.
cool.
This SARD was a cool one, but you guys had Bypass WED 1147.
Yeah.
Just because those are my favorite numbers, was Bypass, and he was a maintenance. He was one of those weird swivelly armed like maintenance droids, but he had lots of computer skills. And literally, like, here's the thing about Scoos. I wanted to make an interesting character, but I didn't make Scoos being like, this is going to be their NPC for the rest of the campaign. I wanted you guys to get an option of 2 different NPCs, and I wanted it to be a statement with how you're going to approach problem solving. So one is loud and ridiculous and obnoxious and an explosion, and the other is a super practical droid that would have been very helpful.
I love your notes. I love your notes for Scoos. Gossip, Safford, squint eyes, pucker lips, and whisper when RPing.
That was literally all Scoos was until we interacted with you.
Well, it's the 3 of us literally like making a propane run one evening. Because like the girl ran out of propane when I was over.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, all right, everybody load up. We got to go refill propane bottles. And on the way, you guys just talking about Scoos, and like Jerry, like you guys pulling up
The
like
image
the
of a
like
gossip.
and just both of you being like, that's exactly the face Eric's you know just makes so much sense now.
I was wondering why he was doing that, and then you see it's like, oh, that's why.
And again, hey, shameless self plug. If you're watching this, watch our video about a like RP advice for DMs not super comfortable RPing their characters. I should have included this as part of it. Like I kind of did when like making notes about how to RP characters. Having a little note like that, just remember like I can get into character very easily as Scoos because I literally go like this. No, now I'm Scoos, and I just remember that this is how I. And then like. It's a piece of that character.
It doesn't require you to say Vladimir in the assault
or like you want to see
If you want to see an example, watch our last
Devils of the West.
Hello, I am Bjork.
I'm Bjork.
What was the word? Was it y'all? Y'all? Instead of Vladimir.
You were getting a little bit Irish there.
I was starting to shift, and that's something I also mentioned in that video.
Because it was
if you
one of
mess
those.
up, wind it back and just redo it, and it's fine if you mess up at the voice you were going for.
Well, it was one of those deals too, because I mean, kind of still off topic with this. When I was talking with Bjork, I was trying to do my Western accent, but I ended up doing this.
He's like, "Are you mocking me?"
Like Eric's being so overblown with his accent that you end up doing the same accent. Well, it's so hard. Here's a word of advice: if you want players to take villains seriously, don't give them ridiculous voices. Scratch is an easy character to take seriously because the sort of kind of creepy, almost Matthew McConaughey kind of smooth
talking
is like, and especially everything he's saying, just everything he says is just like
that's going in our out of context.
Like he's an easy villain to take seriously. Bjorkland was not an easy villain to take seriously, and and that helps Scoos being a ridiculous character to have a ridiculous voice.
And both of those characters I did not want to have taken seriously.
Yes.
I wanted them to be ridiculous.
I think I might be God comment from Bjorkland was just like it's just everyone was like it's just like the kill table or the like I've just had in that bad Swedish accent. The "How dare you?" just like constant in my head ever since when he like leaned out the window and blew me up with a grenade launcher.
My favorite was like, "Don't do that thing," but like muttered to the side. But back to this story.
Okay.
Any other questions about behind the screen stuff?
Okay. This is just for the final fight. What? How many of the enemies we were facing? How many of them had monologues they were ready to give?
I had nothing written. I had no written monologue. It was literally like Jakar was definitely kingpin of the assholes. Like he was the central focal figure in that, and like probably the scariest combatant there. And so I wanted to have that moment where he walks forward and is like, "One last chance, man, is to join the dark side." Like I wanted that. I wanted to try and bring that moment up, but then him just flipping in the burn, he's like, well, I guess we'll kill you all. And then like it just went in from there.
It's fun as player characters to see villains get flustered. Like, and that's always something that I appreciate in film and video games is villains realizing they're in trouble, villains getting flustered, or like villains not dying like clean, glorious deaths.
Yeah.
Like, I always really appreciate that in writing because it feels very satisfying to have the villains kind of suffer that little bit. So like him having this moment where he's approaching in all confidence, he's about to give that speech, and man is flipping him off, kind of flusters him for a second. Is really gratifying to the players.
But yeah, honestly, I
really appreciate that.
You as characters to have a moment to say something if you wanted to, and then there was going to be a rebuttal or a return from them based on what you said. But I didn't want it. I didn't want the.
I did say something.
Yes.
I yelled, "You
damn
barrels!" I didn't want it to be literally like me writing 4 monologues and going one from the next to the next and like having them do that because that doesn't.
Don't prepare any.
Well, I wasn't like
because as soon as you start delivering it, one of the asshole party members is going to just
grab
kick
the
whole
amulet
thing
and
off.
bring the trap down on top of us.
Because even I was preparing for Stygian to at least say something, but the moment Manus flipped off Jakar flipped off Jakar, and it was game on. I was like, well, I guess I'm not gonna have me and Stygian aren't gonna have our moment in the sun together.
Going directly under, I always say, let keeping lickins chai. Thank you, Erickson. Be a lot cooler.
Matthew McConaughey voice. Be a lot cooler if you see it. For anyone wondering, we have massive lists of out-of-context quotes, both related to RPGs and not. Maybe at some point we'll do something as content with those.
I also wonder if we should, if we do release them, if maybe we should just choose a few to not get released. There are a few in there that probably shouldn't see the light of day.
Well, I mean, but it's like also, how do we do that? Just like, do we just do like the prisoner pose, and then somebody sits down, reads it, and then goes to the next?
I know exactly how we need to do it.
It's a conversation for a future production meeting.
We have those.
We've had
Speaking of which,
2 of those.
Speaking of which, we need to have one soon.
Yes.
We should schedule it right now on camera.
Let's do the thing one of my favorite podcasts do and make their producer super mad by starting to have scheduling conversations in the middle of the podcast.
Joke's on you. We're all the producers.
We'll all make ourselves super mad. But
okay.
Any other questions about behind the screen stuff?
Really, I have no questions. No more questions. I just want to reminisce.
No more questions.
I have more questions. No more questions, but I have more questions.
It's not a question. It's just I'm just reminiscing over probably one of the coolest moments in our campaign when we were leaving the Titan and we blew it up with our using the tracking beam. That was a cool cinematic moment.
There's lots of cool cinematic moments of tractor beams being the problem. Some of you go inside the ship to blow them up, and some of you use your bomber and some luckily timed bomb releasing to suction a bomb into a tractor beam.
I'm super happy with how that whole Zadra rescue mission went. For how difficult of a thing it was that we're pulling off, and Manus having to try and survive by himself for so long in that fight. To me, that's it's on a much smaller scale, but that's the whole Death Star thing, right?
Yeah.
Of sneaking on board, we're just we've got systems we need to disable, we've got somebody we need to rescue, let's go for it, let's do it. So I guess that actually reminds me of a question. Was there anything with that guy that prisoner that died while we were trying to escape?
There was very loose something with him. Did I even make a Did I make a note of that man's bravery?
I gave it a 50%. I gave it a 50% chance when it's like, oh, there is somebody being imprisoned here. I gave it a 50% chance of it being Dev, to be honest, which would have been hilarious. Us like opening a prison cell on an Inquisitor vessel, and it's just Dev, and it's like, oh, god damn it, what are you doing here?
Wait, is this an intervention? I'm no longer on this place. I kicked this stuff.
Oh yeah, who? That's another one. The number that Manus stole. If we had called that number, who would have been on the other end of it?
So that's another good question. So first of all, I don't even think I have the name written down. He was a random NPC. I had decided that there was going to be someone in the prisoner bay in case you guys got there before you got somewhere else. So it's like maybe it's Zadra. He was going to be somebody that was also a potential rebel tie-in. And that's why he's in prison there. But it was very loose. He wasn't somebody who had a bunch of backstory or anything like that. It was someone I could kind of free flow use as I saw fit. Once you said he was a rando Calrissian.
I remember exactly two things about him. One, he was a super chill dude, and two, he died.
He died trying feebly to help. He was also kind of an old doddering dude who was going to be a potential like hindrance to you guys as you're trying to escape. It didn't really come up in that way, but it was
yeah, because R3 was late.
Yeah. Hey, R3 arrives precisely when he means.
I will be bitter, completely arbitrarily bitter about R3 for the rest of our experience playing tabletop RPGs for no good reason. I don't necessarily think he deserves it, but I'll just continue to be bitter about it.
I won't judge you for it. As far as the number from Dev, it was another one of those kind of random things I came up with. The loose decision I had made for what it was going to be was somebody that Dev had recently completed a contract with, and it did not go well. And if you called with any knowledge of Dev Malior, it would have been an opportunity for you guys to sell Dev Malior out to them if you wanted to. Like basically somebody who did a job and it ended up going south, and he ended up running away and causing them trouble.
I fully, and it's interesting because Dev Malior's, over the years that I've seen Dev Malior show up in games, has definitely become more useless than it used to be. Like, not that he was ever like, he was always getting into trouble and he was never like truly useful. The old joke is that like every time Dev Malior shows up, he gets shot in the stomach.
Mm-hmm. Which did literally happen some of the campaigns, but not all.
At least. It's happened at least 3 times.
I mean, we blew him up, so...
I think that counts. Because, like, the very first time we ever met him, he's literally just, like... There's some people trying to kill me. I need... Like, if you can get me to the spaceport, I'll get you off of the space station and get you to Coruscant. Because Wookiee had stolen our ship, and we were after that damn Wookiee. And it was literally just us doing a one-shot, just learning how to make characters, learning how to play the game. And... we step outside, Dev gets shot in the stomach. Like, and he wasn't this Dev, you know what I mean? Like, he's definitely, like, evolved.
And just a quick, we discussed it before, but the backstory of Dev Malior is we were wanting to play the Star Wars RPG. I was going to run the first one-shot to just try it out, and I wanted to figure out how character creation works, so I just was like, I'm going to just make a level 1 Han Solo, and just go through the process and see what it's like. And that's why Dev Malior, my first Star Wars RPG character, was literally Han Solo, but worse in every miserable metric, because he's literally a level 1 Han Solo.
And he showed up in literally the first 2 things you ran.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was just like...
he's going to show up everywhere.
He's going to show up everywhere. Like, some things have been made canon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he has connections to the rebels.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of a double-crossing scumbag. Like...
Now, with this most recent iteration, we've canonized the fact that he has a ship he thinks is exceptional, but is not exceptional, which is the Dubak's Belly. I'm so happy with that name of the ship, Dubak's Belly.
That son of a bitch in that ship, I swear to God. Sneaking onto that... we sneak him to get his ship. Get all the way there. First thing he does when he steps on it is, "Daddy's home!" Son of a...
So, like, I fully intend to make a Star Wars character in the future that is, like, actually buddies with Dev. I have a spice-addicted Bothan smuggler that I really want to play. Like, preferably kind of as a rebel, because I love the idea of, like, this dude is scum. He's a smuggler, he's a spy, he's addicted to the whole range of spice, he's shifty as fuck, and he's working with the rebels. He's a good guy. Like, and I just love the idea of that character being like, Dev, oh buddy, hey, like actually being excited to see
son
him.
of a bitch.
Yeah, and not just like,
I see the Dumax belly still got you pushing pencils.
we reference that one scene in Predator all
Way
the
too
time.
much. Way too much.
Dylan, you son of a bitch.
But yeah, so I loved getting Dev's involvement. You had Dev as a person involved in 2 different bounties you were hunting down. Dev was the reason that you got your ass kicked by rebels or by stormtroopers. The 2 of you had to rescue Dev and his ship, and Dev basically helped the Force Sensitives set up a underground pit fight on Mon Cala when they were there. Which also, another little bit of connection backstory. That dude that did your armor on Mon Cala was an old friend of Master Tegunji's. And that was the old coordinates that were on that Jedi Starfighter, and an old friend of R3's as well, and why R3 took them there when they were trying to find a new ship. And that's how that whole interaction happened. And just like your buddy Garo Das, they got reamed in that deal. That ship was worth like 260,000 credits, and they traded it for a like 70,000 credit like junker freighter. And this dude took him for a trip, but he was like an old friend,
Which
so they
is
thought they could
so
trust him.
it's just funny, like them getting taken in stages, trading the same ship. Is
decreasing their value each step of the way.
It's like, all right, we trade this ship for this ship, then we trade this ship for credits. But every time they like cut their profits by half.
It's like, pretty hilarious.
I just like going back to Garo's like little spaceport. It's just like, Garo, you son of a bitch. Like,
I got 2 things I gotta say to you.
yeah. Was like, it's like, that was to me just always fun. Is like, and that's what I've always liked about RPGs anyway, is people showing up again later, especially side characters, or like when Mr. Lanius showed up again in our very first D&D campaign.
Mr. Lanius.
But he had just done so badly at this archery contest that it just like made him like reevaluate his life, so he like took to the road to like travel the world and become a great adventurer, and we just hired him as a guard in our city. Like, but it's just like
those moments are great.
Yeah, like it makes the world feel alive, you know what I mean? It makes like all of those threads running through the world, and like anytime something would come up that more than one person recognized, or like, everybody kind of having secrets and having references and stuff like that, just like it just makes the world feel like it's actually kind of around and doing something.
It was kind of interesting to have that secret of, until necessary, of this clone trooper having a lightsaber, not mentioning it, and then
you stick a laser sword in there. And Scoot's just dropping it.
The look between you two when you did that, because it's still you doing Scooz's face, but there's a look in your eyes, at least in the edit of that video, of what you gonna do about it. like there's this straight up like, yeah, I just fucking did that. Come on. Yes, let's make this. It's this like actual like anger on like Jerry's side, and this like, and just this like, and I'm like, I just love like, and you have to know like this is a bunch of friends playing the game. You kind of have to know to look for it, but there's this. It's still Scooz's face, but it's your eyes being like, come at me, yeah, I can do it, motherfucker.
That just happened.
Yeah,
let's go.
Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Well, the first time it happened, it was just like, because it was one of those situations where I was like, where you had the key to the puzzle, but you just didn't know it yet, and it was kind of trial and error.
And then you realize it. Like, I don't want to tell everyone I have the key to this puzzle.
But I kind of have to
finish the puzzle.
And then Scoo's immediately trying to sell me junk or trade me junk for it.
And that was great, because then that made the carrying on like trend of Scoo's wanting to trade for all the cool shit. So then he sees the rock and he's like, you want to trade? And then it goes Flopsy, so she's of course like, what you got? And then it makes the fun interaction there later on.
And I do just like that it feels like at every turn, at least like kind of from like arriving on Mandalore onwards, it feels like it's just like riding in over his head. You know what I mean? Like he's gonna shoot his way out of it, but he is being just dragged along for the ride, and it is at every turn. It's on all sides, which is why I do really love that moment of like, well, shit, Skull, you got one of these lightsaber things too? Like, am I the only one? Like, what's going on? And then like spending the rest of the time in the Jedi Temple just like looking for lightsabers.
Well, yeah, it was just kind of funny because the moment we realized what the key was, I had a feeling that was where you were going.
Well, and the fact that you specifically made it 3, it required 3 lightsabers to open, knowing full damn well that Flopsies wouldn't open it, is just like, because it's essentially lightsaber brass knuckles. It was just like, it's like, I immediately just as a game master myself, just immediately is like, it's like that number was very intentional. Like, there's a chance if it had been 2 that secret would have been revealed anyway. Like, Skoos could have done the same thing. But there's also every likelihood that Manus and Zadra would have just jumped on it.
And it worked really well because it just followed the trend of the temples. Like, every temple was a different race, and it was 3. It was always 3. And that was another thing that I can kind of explain briefly, too, is like each temple had a slight difference to it, in that the original temple they were in with Master Tegunji, both of the cross-legged ones had blue orbs, and that's because the original sect of the Grey Order that started there was Jedi. And the Raptor planet, both were red orbs with the gold in the middle, because it was originally a Sith coven that transferred over to being Grey Jedi.
Sith Raptors.
Yes, Sith Raptors, which is horrifying and awesome.
But it's also like, part of the whole thing with like at least the prequels is
Sith
like
Raptors.
you're never supposed to quite know who the hooded figures are, right? Because they're like, because the hoods come down to here. Like, but if it's literally a raptor in like Sith robes, it's like when you see that guy the next day on the Senate floor, you're like, I think it might be that guy.
And then it's just simple one of each, because there was 2 different groups coming together. But
no, I really liked, I've always liked the idea of like the Grey Jedis and stuff as well. I've always kind of wanted to, I have kind of a couple of different Grey Jedi character ideas, and so I just really liked sort of expounding on the lore and stuff like that. I think it was.
I loved coming up with what a Grey Jedi holocron looks like. And, like, how do I make them the coolest holocrons? Yeah. Because you got, like, the pyramids for the Sith, the cubes, and I was like, it's sphere, it's perfect, it's, like, this perfect shape.
It's perfect balance.
Perfect,
I want to play a Grey Jedi character who's naturally light side focused, so they use one of those, like, dark side corrupted lightsaber crystals in an attempt to balance themselves. I think that's, like...
And I honestly saw that as a potential Manus pickup, because he was talking about dual wielding, and I was like, maybe eventually he dual wields the 2 of those, and that's kind of that dichotomy.
Instead, the people who didn't have lightsabers decided to get themselves.
Because we got left out. Then this guy over here just picks it up and
like, you get spooky feelings, huh?
Well, no, not like Skoos where he just drops it.
I mean,
I
cursed
guess
weapons is just what I'm all about.
Really?
There you go. Yeah, that's true. There is sort of a
shame.
There is sort of a quasi-statistical question there, I guess, of like. There's no secret of the fact that Skoos has like a nuclear warhead in his backpack all through that final adventure. What would have been the Game Master decision had that actually been used?
I wouldn't have used it in a... I would have worked very hard to stray away from using it in a sense where it would not be used... what's the word I'm looking for? In a story-driven, non-statistical way.
Right.
Okay. Like, something like that was in the backpack in case you guys were like, we need to blow some big fucking thing up, and then Skoos would like strap a timer to that and make it into a bomb. And that was the like, I wasn't about to have him just like throw it and hope for the best. Like, unless it was a very weird situation at that point, it's something I would have handled pretty loosely, just because of the scale of that.
Right.
So it's something that he told me to get some explosives. Like, it'll be fucking hilarious if he goes and he steals this from one of the X-Wings, and then it's like, that's the reason Porkins isn't able to blow up the Death Star.
Well, that was immediately the thing. It's like, Luke shoots a proton torpedoes into the Death Star, and nothing happens. Because Skoos is running around with his proton torpedo warhead.
In a backpack. The Scoo's backpack was another thing that kind of organically happened and
where
developed.
you just realize it'd be more funny in 2 character for him to have this chaotic and unorganized backpack.
Well, and I tend to do the same thing with NPCs. Like Keba, the kid who taught you guys to ride the giant hawks in that D&D campaign. Where you guys just like spent 6 months living in his house and like learning to like ride giant hawks is just like he became a much goofier character over the course of the interaction with him, and a much more like childlike character. Like he was always supposed to be a kid, but like this sort of like naturally like druidically gifted one, which is why he could just like communicate with animals. But he just like as soon as one sort of goofy childlike thing becomes funny, like and the party becomes attached to it, it just starts to kind of like you just start to end up leaning into that kind of stuff more.
Yeah.
And that's the lovely thing about a lot of those NPCs is a lot of that stuff happens organically. You see what works and sticks, and you just carry on with it.
Well, and that's why
And that's what
players end up
Scoo's
coming
was.
back to certain NPCs or avoiding certain NPCs. Leonard is from way back in the day is a great example of that. I think Spindly Norman's
a
a good example.
pretty good comparison to Leonard. Different but similar in a lot of ways.
It was just like every once in a while, people are just like, I kind of want to go talk to Spindly Norman. Like,
and then Jocelyn be like, I'll go with you, but I don't want to.
and then just like now, it's just like I will never go back to Spindly Norman's place.
Babies shouldn't drink wine. What the hell is that supposed to mean? You trying to tell us that Grimes was a kid?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I was just like,
It was a really good campaign. I'm really happy with how it kind of all shaped up.
well, and it's nice to do a campaign where like there are like big stakes. It's a big final fight and stuff, but it's not. You're not blowing up the Death Star to end the campaign and stuff. Like
You're not blowing up the secret third Death Star that they built.
But this one's built out of multiple planets, and it's called a Superstar Destroyer Killer Base Supreme Alpha.
well, you know how the Star Destroyer, it's like all the different beams shoot down, and then it does a big blast. It's just really, really big ones built on each planet. So they all shoot into like the center of the solar system and then shoot
into a sun that has heat of sun.
Don't get me wrong, that's super rad. I don't want that to be like official Star Wars canon because it's just like, oh, the Empire had that thing the whole time. That sort of cheapens the 2 Death Stars.
Yeah.
It's like why the hell were we afraid of those 2 when they got this?
I was actually kind of wondering this earlier. Sooner or later, it's probably not going to be soon, just because we have
So much more coming up.
we have we have the little campaign for October. We
It's
have
gonna be awesome.
which is I'm so excited for it just because it is not how campaigns are normally run, which lets us remove all the stakes, sort of to some degrees throw a good chunk of the rulebook to the winds and just roll with it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to meet everybody's characters officially in that. It's going to be wonderful. We have the sort of the top secret project after that, and and then it's just like we have so many campaigns planned. I'm sure you have a bunch, but I have 3-ish that I'd like to run on the channel eventually. A Savage Worlds one that I've been prepping for a long time. It's probably not going to be the next one I run because of since we're running Devils of the West at the same time, and it's nice to just vary it up.
Varieties.
I have another Savage Worlds one that I recently started planning, and as well as a D&D campaign, which is probably the one that I'm going to run next.
Next after other project.
And we've given some thought to doing this same method of like sort of starting everybody's, doing at least a couple sessions with everybody alone to start building backstory and drifting together.
We're
But
just
that, of
gonna
course,
break into Erickson's house to record
Yeah.
those while he's gone.
it of course just like creates a ton of scheduling trouble for us already, where our scheduling
And that's
can be
another bit of
ridiculous.
advice really quickly to just talk about this while we're reviewing this kind of, if you're considering doing something like that and you want it to work well, and you have to consider the free time you as the person running it have. Because especially for us, like, it was okay because we record a couple episodes at a time, so I didn't have to meet every week. to maintain it.
But you were pretty much having to meet with somebody
every single week for that, at least, while also doing the Devils of the West. And like it was a lot, and it was like major relief each time a campaign came together. But it's a lot. It's a lot to take on, especially if you're doing it like 4 to 5 different games you're running at the same time. If you want them to meet consistently enough that the flow works well, it's going to be a lot, especially early on.
It's not just a lot of prep work as far as like making sure everybody has adventures to go on and stuff to do and make sure there's threads connecting them, but it's just a lot of effort to prep that much. It's a lot of effort to meet with that many people and stuff. So it's kind of a conversation we've been having off and on for a couple weeks now, is like how exactly we want to structure this D&D campaign, because I would love to get the benefits of this, but we may not be able to, like, at the moment, kind of commit to that same structure. We're trying to figure it out. But sooner or later, we are going to dip our toes back into this system. I know Jerry at least is gonna run something at the very least, like for some other friends of yours, which sounds like their initial campaign where they all kind of learned the system just went bonkers and off the rails in amazing ways. So we've sooner or later we're going to dip back into this because we love
Star Wars,
and I'm still open. I'm open to planning a campaign for this, especially.
So I guess the question therein is sort of should when we dip back into this, especially if we do another sort of Grey Squadron style rebel campaign, or whether we're doing another Force sensitive campaign or a mix. Is this all sort of canon now in your Star Wars? Because obviously Dev Mallior has shown up in my campaign. Pervasive. He's shown up in in everything you've run. Like, there are kind of some threads holding stuff together. There's some potential that my Inquisitors and your Inquisitors are both canon. It's just kind of taking place at different times and at different places.
I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of I wasn't banking on the fact, but I was really prepared for if Badger had died, I was just gonna quickly open Boxus's stat sheet and just have him come down the elevator and be like, "Yeah, I'm looking for a guy by the name of Raiden."
The way I look at it is all of our stuff, Star Wars Galaxy is huge, and all of the stuff we've played is in one way or another canon inside of it, with varying levels of nods to it in future games. What I would want to avoid if we're playing something again and it's not a continuation of this story is having the next campaign just be like, yeah, we made these new characters, but let's just go down memory lane of the last campaign. I'd want it to be nods and homages and moments that's like, you meet this rebel lieutenant and he's this goofy Scoos. It's in the future or something.
Lieutenant Scoos.
Something like that could be a fun.
Become a lieutenant.
It could be a fun interaction.
Lieutenant Scoos was my best good friend.
the Battle of Endor, all the Mon Cal.
Oh, that was Bubba.
All the Mon Cal battle cruisers. This old big Battle of Endor. They're trying to destroy the second Death Star, and it's a trap, man. He's sitting in one of the swivel chairs.
They give him the command of the Leviathan.
Commanding a starship.
I wouldn't want it to be too much of a look at what we've done. Because if anyone's watched a movie that is a sequel or prequel to something else, and it's just hey, remember that thing we did and how good it was? I.e., a lot of my issues with the first of the Disney trilogy of movies, where it's it was so insanely safe because it was just the classic Star Wars blow up the Death Star story in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I wanted something new and different. I wouldn't want to fall into that same trap of let's just reminisce. I want to make it something
and that's
you want to be
well,
oh, hey, this guy has a mission for us. Well, he's a little weird. His name goes by the name of Scoos.
Frama Dayun Scuzanjo?
That's Colonel Scuzanjo to you.
That's
how do you get promoted again?
That's Admiral Scoos to you.
Scoob's being an admiral is like the scariest and funniest thing I've ever heard. Because like, how did he get that rank?
But blowing up everybody between his rank and that rank.
Exactly. But yeah,
and we've run into that issue before. Mm-hmm. Which honestly is like looking back on it, it's like that was a good campaign on its own, but like we were just all trying too hard to like recapture the glory of the good of the like campaign that campaign was a sequel to. Mm-hmm. It's just always like interesting because like because part of what we did was create a couple of relatively powerful forces in the galaxy. Mm-hmm. They're both small scale, but like they like the sort of the spheres of influence that they're in and the power that they wield is relatively broad. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, it's just an interesting question of like, is making a Grey Jedi in the future, Grey Jedi Force sensitive in the future, sort of essentially out just because like, well, why are you on the run bumming around here and not working with the actual like,
and that's where I go to like the galaxy's huge, right. And the thing they have that lets them find force sensitives works in orbit of a planet, which is a massive scale. But when you think of the number of planets in the Star Wars galaxy, there is certainly a Grey Jedi exile somewhere.
And they're not going to collect literally every person they find,
exactly,
because like
gotta have standards.
That and it's just impossible. You know what I mean? It's just like the Inquisitors find you extremely easy if you do that, mm-hmm. And they come in force enough that calling Uncle Raiten's not going to help. But it is kind of a fun idea to put a group of force-sensitive characters in a bad situation, only to have them get busted out by this guy who's just like oh, you guys can just go do whatever the fuck you want. We were just here to kill the Inquisitors. It's like,
yeah. And the thing is, like, if they'd show up, it wouldn't be probably even in that capacity, if I'm honest, because I wouldn't want them to show up and solve a problem for the characters.
Fair. That's totally fair.
What I would want it to be is them to basically, like, they're fled, like, they're maybe not even a force-sensitive group, but they get a job contract by some strange, mysterious cult, and that cult ends up being that Grey Jedi Order. Mm-hmm. And I'd want him to be, like, Raiden and Flopsy to be these strange dichotomous force masters who send them on an errand for them. Manus and
Raiden is sick of
all those bullshit. But like them being like quest givers that are a single interaction and then you move on. I wouldn't want to dwell on the past.
And I think the Rebels are in a good position for that. Shulo and Alikern and stuff like that.
And the NPCs are a little more on the table as quest givers too, because the other thing I really try to shy away from, part of this from lessons learned, is like I don't want to make decisions for people's characters once they become NPCs that make them feel like bad about what their characters became or what their characters are doing. I don't want to do too much of the like, you're not Raiden anymore, so I'm going to tell you what Raiden does, because Raiden is he's your property in my eyes.
You can do what you want with him. That guy's an asshole.
Exactly. But like, I wouldn't want to not do honor to him in the way that you would see and see as what he would do as a character. Right. And that's something I'd want to shy away from leaning into too heavily. And I think that's just good advice in general for follow-up campaigns for people.
No, absolutely.
Homage, you want to have homage without focus on that homage, and you want to show what's become of characters without deciding who they've become, instead of naturally showing the same character.
And really the easiest way to do that is small-scale stories in a large-scale world.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right. Like, the stuff we were up to isn't quite earth-shattering enough that, like, hey, wow, every campaign you run into after this, we're going to be running into those same characters. And it's not, it's taking place in a galaxy that's just, like... Huge.
Your story matters without having to impact every other story in the galaxy. Which is very good. Yeah.
I think that's
a decent spot. What is there any other questions? Any other moments you want to reminisce on? Any other big things that are like? I have one last thing I'd like to say. So maybe not the moments part, but any other questions or thoughts that you guys want to throw out?
I mean, part of me wants to know whatever Biala's name is now, but it also doesn't matter. And I also doubt you prepared that.
It's John.
It's John Travolta.
John Travolta.
That is a good stuff.
That's a Star John Travolta.
I mean, I'm going to use that for my campaign. You ran into a guy who kind of looks like John Travolta, but his name is John Travolta.
Well, I mean, your name was literally from a misspelling in a software you use at work. She's like, this is a great Star
Framadayun
Wars name.
Skuzanjo is literally a nickname for a magic card turned into a little space scumbag.
I mean,
So, a closing thing. We maybe have already discussed it. I want a single moment that just is this campaign to you. Favorite moment, most memorable moment, just a moment you think about this campaign and your mind immediately jumps to. You go.
It was the moment that he crashed and we were yelling at each other and bantering.
Oh, yeah.
So when he crashed, he killed me because it was just that perfect combination of Towaku just being so fed up with the Imperials, and he doesn't know. He has no idea what a clone trooper is versus a stormtrooper. They're all just Imperials to him.
Both got the word trooper in their name.
So, so it was just this him landing, especially because he had no idea what my backstory was, and I didn't know anything about his, and he landed thinking he had it hard.
okay, losing my friends,
but he's
just getting booted out of the only life I've ever known. Okay, that wasn't hard.
But then you think you have they killed me. That moment was
but
shift keys.
It's just thinking he was the one that had all the because as far as he knew, he's just even if he knew it was my farm. He just thought I was just a farmer.
Yeah, he doesn't know what you faced against him.
He doesn't know you've already had the worst day of your life.
Yeah. So it's just this argument between us.
It's literally just two people who've had a terrible day, and one of them is working at a cash register, and the other one just bought groceries, and they're both like, you have no idea what a force of nature I am right now, and you just rung up the wrong thing, and now we're both about to explode on each other.
Oh yeah, you think you got it bad? They killed me. Wait, then how are you talking? I got better.
That was an exceptional moment. That was a good one. Though. What about yours?
For me, it's two things. It's Zadra hiring Raiden to rescue Flopsy and Manus, and sort of really because that's the moment they how meet each other. Mm-hmm. It's what precipitates all of the chaos that comes afterwards, and just how really crazy cool it is that you were able to recruit somebody for a rescue mission before anybody was actually in danger. That and it's Skooz laying on the floor of the ship, just going, "Oh, I'm dying."
Mate.
It's the pause. It's the pause before he says "man." That's just it's just such. It's just such an afterthought to it that just I love that I love that line and it's sort of one of the worst days Raiden's ever had. It's there's all this shit going on elsewhere on the planet. They're in the middle of the Russian nesting doll of suicide missions, and it's just Skooz thinking it
his life is
the hardest. He just got murdered by a monster that destroys planets, and he's just but that pause with the "I'm dying, mate" is I just I will remember that about this campaign. I think forever. I love that so much.
I have several that I can think of just because
you'll get one,
and you'll like it.
You can have no more than 3.
Yeah.
We did 1, we did 2. I'll let you have 3 as the third person.
So the first one, obviously, because I talked about it, was doing the cool maneuver to use the bombs to blow up the tractor beam, just because that's just a cool cinematic moment. That right? Cool that's not really anything involving Skooz. Because Skooz just had so many moments, you just can't pick one. Probably my favorite with Skooz, though, was when Flopsy picked him up and he was about to pull out his blaster pistol.
His rocket launcher pistol?
Yeah, he was a rocket launcher pistol to blow whatever up. And he's like, "Whoa, my backpack is magic, man." Probably the last one is just the big reveal to everybody was from Skooz. You used that laser sword like you did on that planet.
Are you the Pacific Laser Sword? And like, just, oh man, the eye contact between you two again. It's just.
I need to go back and watch that episode again and just pause. I want to see
here because I
moment.
need to see this.
I remember living the moment, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
and
right.
Focus on it and take it all in.
It's so good.
I loved the full circle moment between Scoos being like landing on the Raptor planet and then being like, land here, and him being like, I do what I want, don't tell me what to do or whatever, and you being like, what the fuck are you doing, and him just being like, I don't like being told what to do, I'm a rebel, man.
Yeah.
Like that moment coming around to you guys all offering Scoos like a job and him having the like, I'm a rebel, man. Like, I'm staying here moment. Like, I loved that fruition. And I think the other big moment to me that really was this, I loved seeing character-wise, was the Zadra conversation with Raiden. And, like, this kind of, and just, like, this realization of, like, we are two people who are both judging the hell out of each other. And when we really think about it, we're the same fucking guy.
And I like that moment so much because it feels like the first... It feels like almost the first time that Zadra's being truly honest. Mm-hmm. Like, over the course of the campaign of just this, like, and it is literally just like, it's like, look, we're men of action. Like, I get it. We don't really come up with plans, you know, like, we run in there, we shoot shit, like it is just a fantastic moment, and I like that it is kind of more a moment precipitated by Zadra more so than Raiden, like, it kind of starts as Zadra's character moment.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like it is a very character-defining moment for Raiden by that conversation.
Yeah.
That's something I really enjoyed. Well, I think that's where we'll call it. If anyone watching this is like, watch the series and has any other questions, they can. I'm happy to go in and answer what I can in the comments. If you have any questions about how something worked or what was going on behind the screen or any other questions along those lines. Thanks for watching.
Do the outro, Scoos. Thanks for watching.
Now go forth. Your dragon flanked bear throw dice. May enjoy your downtime activities, man. Thank you, sincerely, anyone who's watched through the series, especially if you watched all the way through the Star Wars series. It's been a blast to play. It's a lot of episodes. It's so much fun to play, and really a satisfying end.
No, yeah, honestly, just thanks for giving us an excuse to play it.
Yeah.
Like, that's... Like, I love when videos gets a lot of views. I love that the channel is steadily climbing in subscribers, and fairly recently we had a couple of big, like, jumps in subscribers, but, like, the channel has just given us an excuse to actually sit down and play tabletop RPGs, which it feels like we haven't had, like, near as much of a chance to do.
Old, have responsibilities and jobs.
But the thing, and, like, even though I feel like our gameplay stuff is not our most viewed stuff, I know that by the number of views a lot of these get, it's not just us idiots watching it. Like, there are some of you out here who watch through the series.
Yeah, it's not us.
And just by some of the comments we've seen, too, I know there's people who are following through, at least just, like, following through and invested in our story that we're telling. And that means the world. Like, every comment, everything, seeing people follow the story and enjoy it and keep going along with it is like, that means the world to me as a person who runs these games.
It's not just us chuckle fucks watching.
That's right. It's you chuckle fucks at home. And we appreciate the hell out of you. And with that, thank you. Good campaign.
I'm glad we got I'm glad we sort of formalized this, like, post-campaign.
Yeah, and
discussion.
this is going to be something we do going along with all of our games.
I'm looking forward to the Devils of the Lost one.
Yeah.
Along with making a bottle of liquor.
Yeah.
Legally.
Jaresh Gin.
Ooh, we are going to put ourselves in a corner for some future campaigns with that, of just like, what do we make for this?
It'll be interesting to see what
Blue Gatorade? It'd probably work. I mean, it would work.
No, what you do the red Gatorade this time around.
Maybe
Red
that one
Gatorade
will
will
taste
probably-
like Blue Gatorade.
Turns out Gatorade's just sugar water. Some are better sugar waters than others, but anyway,
That's true.
let's bring it in. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed our little post-campaign discussion, and we will see you in our next story. Bye.
Bye.